like beefcake black dude was my homie Spence, right? And friggin' anywhere I went, they just had your back. That's how it was with infantry dudes. So, like if you went out with infantry, like my WLC was with a bunch of infantry dudes, like all like the whole thing. It was just me, little Sergeant E5 Villalobos, and friggin' a bunch of infantry dudes, like right human resources. But they're all like the homies because we'd go, and then what we'd do is every night we'd go drink after WLC. Oh, I guess we're live. For those of you who don't know, WLC is Warriors Leaders Course. It's what you go to when you're making sergeant for the first time. Well, I had made sergeant before, and then they sent me because I like got it when I was in the field. And anyways, so you'd go out every night. Like I'd go out every night with these dudes for WLC for I think what is it, 2 weeks was WLC or was it longer than
Yeah.
that?
No,
It
it's
was
two
two.
weeks or 4 weeks if you went to, because when I went, it was the transitional period between PLDC and WLC. So there were still
Right.
people who were going to the 4 week long
Yeah.
PLDC slash WLC, and then I went to the. My first sergeant hooked me up, and he sent me to the National Guard one in like Nebraska,
Oh,
and it
mine
was a
it
two
was
week.
definitely, yeah, it was definitely WLC, but it was in Germany. This is when I was in Germany. So Frankfurt, or not Frankfurt, it was Grafenwehr, Germany. Me and a bunch of infantry dudes in WLC. Every single night we'd go out and drink because they let us go off post, and like right outside the gate is just like pub upon pub that are open till like zero whatever. They don't close. They don't close in Germany. I think most of the time they close for like an hour just to clean. But then we'd get drunk and then come back by like 3, 4 in the morning, and then just jog. Like get maybe 2, 3 hours of sleep, depending on who was like really wasted and had to go back. And then we do the morning run and then just be drunk the whole day. And like it was the funniest thing because we were so good, like the group was so good, like it was infantry, right? So we were still passing everything. But the last day, graduation day, we stayed out. Like we were like, yeah, we're graduating. We stayed out until like it was like right before PT, and like nobody even had time to shower or shave or anything. And so we do PT, and then we have to go straight to the graduation, so nobody gets a chance to shower or shave. And like we get there, and the fucking cadre, they show up and they're doing their inspection, and they're just like everybody, like they couldn't tell who was drunk because everybody reeked of booze. And I just remember him walking down the line and looking at us. And when he got to me, like I get stubble fast. Like, dude, a day and it's like dark. Like I need to shave like every day, like it has to be for the army. I had to shave every day. And like he looked at me and he saw like the dark stubble and he was like, Sergeant, no, no, Sergeant. Like he was so disappointed. And then like everybody just kind of like sighed, and he was like, just go walk up to the stage. And that was it. We like graduated. Like we didn't even like we totally got away with it because what were they gonna do? Like it was graduation. We'd all passed. But that was that was fucking how my WLC went. And then I made sergeant. Or I think I made sergeant before and then they sent me out. I
That's
made
how
it
I
in
was.
it
I
was
was one of the. I was because I got promoted when you're deployed, and then when we got back, they were like, "Dude, you got to go to WLC now." And then I went like 2 weeks after that. I went to um, BNOC, the phase one of BNOC, and then
right.
later on, I eventually went to ALC phase two because they did it in like a weird staggered thing. My my greatest drunk on duty story was well, I mean, I have several, I'm sure, but the one when I was in recruiter school, it was my last week, and we had our test out where we had to like demonstrate that we knew how to make the phone calls and conduct the army interview and all that crap, and fill and complete a packet and whatever. It was just a huge waste of time, but it was very like round robin type thing where you would like they'd set it up and they'd be like, all right, this group you're going to such and such, and this group you're going to the other thing, and then you could just do them and be done with them, and then you were like free to do whatever. And then the people who had to retest, which like if you fail recruiter school, you have to be like you're like the bottom of the barrel stupid because the course is designed for you to pass because recruiting is kind of like the gig that you don't want because it's the one that the army sends you to because they
Right.
need people to do it,
Yeah.
which is why they reward the people who volunteer for it, and then they kind of like just give you what you get if they have to choose you. But I was on phone calls the first day, and that night, the night before, because it was Sunday night, I had a new roommate, and for the final week, and I just stayed up drinking, and he was asking me all these questions about recruiter school, and I was just like telling him, but I was sitting there drinking the whole time, and I didn't realize how much I had to drink until it was probably about 4 o'clock in the morning, and then we would have PT at 5:30 because it was TRADOC, right? And so I fell asleep probably around 4:30, and I'm up by 5:15 to run over to the parade field to get into formation, and and at this point I'm just so drunk and so sick, and I'm standing there for reveille for PT. I'm in the middle of the form. I purposely put myself in the middle of the formation so that while reveille was happening, like if I'm because I'm weaving and bobbing and just like rolling all over the place, people would just hold me up. And that's what ended up happening is I'm standing there like and everyone's just kind of like pushing me back into position. And so we do PT, and then I go get a shower and get ready for the day. And when I get to class, they were like, all right, you guys are up for phone calls first. And then they're like, Miller, get over here. And because I had my small group leader was very like, he believed in me for some reason. So he was like, you go first, show these guys how it's done. Not realizing how fucking hammered drunk I was. And you'd have to go into this room, and they would record everything. They were watching you from like a closed circuit TV or camera. And there was a phone in the middle of the room that you would just pick up, and you would do all the crap that you had to do and fill out the form or write down, ask them all the questions that you need to ask, and write down all the notes. They call in, and they're like, hey, we're gonna start in 10 or 30 seconds or whatever it is, so go ahead and get everything ready, and then when the phone rings, answer it, and then you'll be conducting the phone call for the record. And I was like, okay. And so I hang up the phone, and I just puke as hard as I can into this little those little plastic trash cans, and I'm puking into it. And I clean up my face and everything, set the trash can down, and then the phone rings, and I'm like, today's Army, Sergeant Miller, how can I help you? And then I passed. So I mean, it was like, so I felt even less sympathetic for people who failed that class, because I'm like, if I can finish it, first of all, if I can finish it, anyone should be able to. But if I can finish it just hammered drunk, anyone should be able to finish it sober and having studied and prepared for it. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, that was one of my good ones. Then the Audie Murphy board, we all stayed out after it was all done and we had all finished and everything, and they were going to announce who won or whatever. That night, we went out and drank all night, and we just, by the time we got back to the rooms, and it was about 5:30, and they were like, all right, go ahead and form up. We were like, all right. So we show up drunk in our Class A's for the DA photo, and same situation that you had. We all had the stubble and all that. We all reeked of booze and looked like shit, and looked like a Ren and Stimpy cartoon close up, and we all ended up having our DA photos taken that way, whether we wanted to or not. And so for a while, my DA photo, I looked like absolute death, which was a sight to behold. And they forced me to change it before my competition for the E7. Boy. So what are we talking about? What are we talking about for the duologue today? There's a lot of like current events. What'd you do this week, V?
Me? Oh, I wasn't ready for you to ask me this already. What did I do this week? Well, you know what I do is I watch a lot of TV. That's what I do. I watch TV, man. I watch movies and TV all day. Sometimes I'll stop and I'll play a video game, but I have a Nintendo Switch, so I can play video games and watch TV. Like at the same, like, you ever have that where you're what do they call it? Multitask, like watching shit. Like you could have a tablet going and watching TV and like playing your fucking whatever handheld. I'm pretty good at that. I'm pretty good at that, especially if it's like something that I can just kind of have in the background, But lately I've been watching Luther, and I told you about that with Idris Elba, which I really like this show. I think it's good. It's not like amazing, but I would say it's what you would call underrated. But I recommend watching it if you have a chance. Check it out. It's a cop show, but it's like, he's like, how did I say it before? He's not a dirty cop, but he gets his hands dirty to like get things done. And I dig that, man. Like he's still like a good man. Like it's never to like further his own interest or like steal something or whatever. It's to like help with a case. So it's interesting. Like I love that gray area, you know, of law. Like sometimes you go, well, the law isn't helping in this situation. Sometimes, right? And that happens. And you know, I think it's interesting. That's really the gist of what's been going on with me, dude. I haven't had an exciting week at all, really. It's been very in the house. What do the Japanese have a word for it? Hikikomore. It's like I'm a shut-in, right? Or like a modern day hermit. Like I don't go out unless I have to like buy pot or get groceries, you know? Like that's the gist of my life. And of course, like that's what's going on in the world right now too. Like everybody's on quarantine, so you're stuck at home, you know, going, "Ooh, what do I do?" Unless like you have one of those jobs where you actually get to go to work right now, right? Um, Kind of depressing, huh? Like, but there's so many people out of work right now. Like, what the fuck, dude? What's up with this administration? Right? Like, should I get started on that? Like, is that where this conversation is going already?
If
Me
you
ranting
want,
about
I wanted
me
to
ranting about the government. Like, we do that so much, and it sucks because that's my biggest gripe right now is the friggin' government, dude. Like, this fucking let me stand up right now and say this bullshit needs to end, this COVID like lie, this COVID bullshit, and this fucking travel shit, the travel bans and the fucking whatever it is that's stopping me, or the what do they call them, the quarantines before you travel. That shit needs to end. This COVID stuff, like if you think that is like a big deal, you're a retard because it's 99% survival rate. We have other diseases that have that survival rate that you don't get quarantined for. Do you not understand that?
Yeah,
Like,
here's
what is
what's
wrong?
funny. You're yelling about being quarantined and locked down and everything. Like most of the I would say like 48 out of 50 other states, we just do what we want. But California is still the one that it's like one of the few that's still very like strict about lockdowns. Like everyone else has just realized like either the government, the state administrations have lifted everything and said, "You know
I'm
what?
not.
This
I'm
is
not
ridiculous."
talking about the state administration, Tom. I'm
I know. I'm
talking
just
about
saying
federal administrators, the ones that are blocking me from going to see
from
my girlfriend Sharon.
right,
Those are the ones.
right.
Because of them, because of this travel bullshit, I can't do that right now. So I get what you're saying. Yeah, California, I live here and all that, or whatever. But that my life wouldn't change any different here with quarantine.
Right.
But
You
I'm
can't
talking
you're
about
talking about leaving the country.
exactly.
Right.
I'm stuck here. Like, dude, it's like for me, I have what's called wanderlust, and I have the need to just go sometimes. Sometimes you just got to go, right? Somewhere, you know? Don't you
Not
get that? Do
me.
you get what I'm saying?
Not
Go,
me.
like, go somewhere, do something.
I don't go
Adventure, man. It
places.
calls. The chime of the bell of adventure rings loud for men like me. I
I
know
don't
I'm
go
all like,
places. I don't know what that's like.
haven't you seen the world, man? It's an exciting place.
No, I have
I'm,
not
I'm
seen the world.
telling you, it's exciting out there. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to take your word for it because I refuse to go places. Um, I don't even like going like out into public as I go out into public as little as I have to. I would rather sit in the backyard with my birds and with my dogs and stuff. That's how I spend most of my days is you know reading reading assigned books and such. I did want to say on the topic of COVID, right? I was talking to my neighbor about this and how I think it's starting to. You can see how everything is just winding down, and like all these rules and restrictions and stuff are being lifted, and you see how like the vaccine is like they're like talking about how great the vaccine is and all this crap. And I'm starting to wonder if it has anything to do with how expensive it is to give out these stimulus checks, right? Because I think I said to my neighbor, I said, I'll just wait for the next stimulus check, laughingly. And he goes, yeah, if we get another one. And I said, you know what? That might be why we're not seeing as much about COVID, this and that, why we're seeing everything get lifted. Because if it goes away, then they're not going to have to pay out any more stimulus checks, right? And I think now that Biden has to look at the tab, it appears on his desk, he's all of a sudden like, oh, maybe. And Kamala Harris, for instance, she was the one who was talking about monthly stimulus checks, right? And then all of a sudden, now that they have to look at the tab and they have to cover it, they're like, whoa, this is actually a lot more money than I thought it would be. Maybe we should wrap this up now that
Can
people
we,
actually expect me to.
I don't mean to interrupt you or
No,
interject
please,
or anything,
please,
but can
please.
we address the child in the chat real quick? Do you mind if I
Yeah,
do that?
please. Do what
Okay,
you got to do.
so I Love God says, if I was paid to be unemployed, I'd be wandering too. That's a jab at me, for those of you that are also fans of our show or here on the show. He's saying that since I'm unemployed, that I'm able to just wander. Well, here's the thing, I Love God, or whoever you are, or, Nazi, white supremacist kiddo, who claims to be 17 years old. When you're 18, this is what you do. Join the army and then go, do a couple of deployments and, journey the world, because they're going to give you tickets to go where you want, especially if you're deployed. You get one ticket to go wherever you want in the world. That's how I went to Japan. That's how I went to the Ukraine. That's how I went to Taiwan. That's how I went to a bunch of countries, man. Is every time there was leave, I got a free ticket to wherever I wanted. And instead of going back to home, where most people did, I traveled. So I've been all over the world, brah. And you can do the same thing too, especially if you were to do that. So go join the army. Do you have anything to say about that,
There you
Tom?
go.
Do you have any?
No, I agree. I think everybody should. We were actually talking to somebody in the Discord who was trying to join the army. I'm not going to like out him and say his name just in case he doesn't want that information released. But I think anybody who tries or anybody who joins the military or anyone who even tries to, I think that's an admirable thing. And then the benefits are obviously, and this might be the recruiter in me, but there are certainly a lot of benefits that come from it. As far as, I mean, we're seeing it now. I'm going to college completely free. I have no debt. I have multiple degrees, and I don't have a single bit of student debt. And then on top of that, I have the retirement pension, disability. I have health insurance still for the rest of my life, for my wife and kids, for myself. There are so many benefits that come from being in the military that I highly recommend it. And a lot of people are just they're so salty about it, and I get it. I get people have different opinions as to why they would or would not join the army or the military in general. But and
I think we should be
I
more
understand that.
focused on this I Love God guy. Like, look at the things that he's saying in the chat. Like, are we okay with knowing that this guy will someday become like a fucking rooftop killer? Like the guy that stands on the roof and kills people or drives a truck into. I think it's our responsibility to address that. Like,
Okay.
I know we have fun and we joke around and all that, but this guy is like, he comes to our show regularly. And like, that's not what I'm about, dog, at all. I don't want to be responsible because some dude shows up like to troll us, really is what he's done, right? He shows up to troll us, or at least me. I think he's got something personal against me, probably because I'm Mexican and not white, But I feel like it's important that we address that. Like, look at this. Like let's read his chat here for those of you who are listening to us on podcasts. If I was paid to be unemployed, I'd be wandering too, going from bar to with my Bible and some choice words on the Jews. And he claims to be 18. I'm becoming an electrician. Here's the one. Get this. Military was my first plan, not for traveling, though, just for character and skill learning, right? Traveling serves me no purpose. What do you think about this guy? What are your thoughts?
Me?
I can't be the only one that feels this way.
I don't know. I mean, he obviously, when he came into the Discord, it became an issue because he was very flagrant. Is that the word I'm looking for? Very, very, very hateful. And, obviously V had to put a stop to that. Whereas, like most of us, like what I was doing here today, even with him in the chat generally, is I try to ignore him. Yeah, I think people just tried to ignore him. But V, if you are taking a stand against I Love God, I stand beside you, sir.
I appreciate that. So just so I guess just to so that we can move on, just to be clear, we're not cool with you, dude. Like, you can go and do whatever you want with your life and have your life, and you can show up in here and troll us all you want, but no one in here, and at least I speak for Tom and myself, agree with your views or any of that. So yeah, show up and troll us as much as you want, but from here on out, I think everyone's going to ignore you. I don't know how you feel about that, dude.
Well, he's saying it's like the learned elders of Zyklon, which I found out about last week. So he's going
Wow.
on to a thing, which this is great because it helps me to segue into the one thing that I wanted to talk about as
Okay,
part of our
cool.
duo log.
Perfect.
There's this dude that I follow on Twitter. He's a mutual for the account called End of Days Radio, and his thing is at Ninja Shoes. If you want to look into it, uh, and this dude, he used to be pretty like normal as far as normal would go with like the sort of people that we interact with. He used to kind of be like on that same plane of normal that we are. And lately, and I this has been a couple weeks I've been meaning to bring this up because it's gotten to a point where it's ridiculous and I want to address it. He's gone into this whole he'll do these like I don't know if he's being like a character or what. Kind of like that dude. The what the hell's the reptilian hunter? Remember the Grand Hunter? Like he does a character and it's funny. This dude, I don't know if he's doing a character or if he legitimately believes these things. So I want to read some of the passages from the book of End of Days Radio, um, because I think you'll appreciate them. He says, when the price to join the Illuminati is to change your gender and or have bisexual orgies with old white men who control society. And it goes on to like a string of these. Generally, they fall under the same category, the same topic, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes he bounces around, and it's really weird. He says, I have the magical skill and knowledge to join the Illuminati, but I refuse to undergo the sexual initiation. They offered myself and my family a bunker and said I could have both a Lambo and a Tesla, but I said no. I don't want to get raped by old men. Remember, and he goes on, remember that Ace was a great detective. Now he's talking about Ace Ventura. Remember that
What?
Ace was a great detective being sent to rescue a holy white bat named Shakaka. Connect those dots. Keyword equals Ventura, as in Jesse Ventura, who investigates the New World Order.
What the fuck?
Um,
What? That's a kind of a stretch on that connection.
well, everything that he says is a stretch. I'm just gonna zip down a ways and see what the next topic I could find. He talks a lot about like Lucifer and that he's the second come or the third coming of Christ. Or no, I guess the second. I don't know what he's. It's all over the place. It's hard to
Yeah.
keep up, and like every time I think about unfollowing him just because I can't deal with it anymore, I'm like, nah. He says funny things once in a while that like are interesting to me. Uh, so he says, we can manifest a reality where we survive and make it to be 5D. Believe in the Lucy Christ. And he's talking about Lucifer. It's like a Lucifer Christ
What the?
combination.
Yeah.
And all is
Like,
possible. He is going to the yin and yang, I think, is the way he
yeah.
described. I'm not like as caught up on the lore of End of Days Radio as I should be, but that's from what I've gathered in passing. He is going to turn it all around by speaking the thunder truth. He shall illuminate the most darkest of days. The Lucy Christ does not want your soul to your submission or your submission. He wants you to take your power back from these racist pedo fools. When I say
I
Lucy
like that word,
Christ,
pedophiles.
I mean to say that instead of he, because Lucifer Christ has a feminine spirit inside of a male body. Lucifer is the planet Venus and transgender. All this Catholic fear porn stuff is slander from the evil false ones. There is no devil besides the demon inside your own soul.
What the?
Uh, I mean, I'm telling you, if you look at his stuff, sometimes he goes on these rants, and it's almost like, and I think the funniest thing about it to me is he'll say something and it'll get no traction. Like nobody will like it, comment on it, retweet it. There will be no impressions on it except for me. I'll look at it or whatever and I'll see that it has like 0 impressions. And he'll still like he'll go on to this rant, this long tirade of, you know, on that topic, some very obscure thing. It's as if he thinks he has this huge audience that is like clinging to his every word, but then you look back at like all of his posts and they've got almost no interaction whatsoever. And he's never gathered that people are just not interested in what he's talking about, except for me, because and almost for like a point of like just morbid curiosity at this point. I keep looking into his stuff, but nobody else is really reading into it. He's like the prophet on the side of the road that's preaching about some kind of like weird nonsense that just doesn't make sense and
Yeah,
gives other
at all.
sidewalk prophets a bad name. That's what this guy does. And
So that brings up like an interesting question about like let's talk conspiracy.
sure,
Like let's talk conspiracy while we're here. While we're on this topic, let's talk conspiracy. Okay, so here are my thought. Like let's put that into context. We've got this I love God guy in our chat that's been trolling us for weeks now. And we've made our own assumptions about who this person could be because we have no idea really what his motive is, right? To just show up and like bother us or something. So our first thought was, and this was suggested by a couple of the dudes in the Discord, was he's probably the FBI guy. He's probably the FBI guy come to troll us, right? Well, then I started to kind of think about it like, well, that makes an interesting suggestion. I thought, well, what if it was, now here's my theory, right? This is where I go. What if it was somebody from the left, right? Like they see us around on, Twitter posting and they go, oh, it's these guys, they're very right wing, right?
right,
And
right,
they
right,
go, let me show up to these guys' show and try to get them to dox themselves, right? Like this is what they do. They show up, pretend to be extreme, and then expect us to like go, yeah, we agree with you, and F them and F these people and hate, hate, hate. And then they take that and then they go show it to everybody and go, yeah, these guys are racist. Let's get them canceled, right? Or whatever, right? Whatever that method would be. It's like that Biden, what is it? Biden taking L's site, the
yeah, yeah,
Twitter
yeah.
face,
Post
all the
Biden
jokes.
voters posting their L's.
Yeah, well, there's also one that says Trump. There's one that's called Trump voters posting their L's. Like, isn't it weird that there are two different sides of the same coin of jokes, mind you, but they're both like meant to like cancel each other out. Like, just knowing that means that there's an antithesis to every of one of your thoughts or convictions, right? There's always going to be. So that means that there's people out there that are willing to make that effort because they're so big on trolling people that they go, well, how can I troll them? Even especially like the younger ones, right? Like the kids, that's what they think is cool, is to be a troll. And so they go, oh, how do I troll even harder? How do I troll even harder? Or what's the term now? Like, is there a term? Is troll still like? Would that be the appropriate
Trolling, I
term
think,
for
is still the
is it still you'd still say so? That's what it is. It's like there's trolls on both sides. We're trolls. We troll the left when we have the chance, right? Or at least we mock them, right? So to that extent, if there's a side of us, there are like, let's go alternate dimension V and Tom, right? It's called You Had Me at Wendigo.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
two guys that talk about conspiracy and all this other crap, but it's the left. It's the left wing side of it all, right? And they're going, oh, Trump this and Trump that and F that. Oh, Biden's so great and all this. But they're also talking about Bigfoot dicks and whatever.
It should be
Like
us,
this,
and you just put on a fake mustache, and you're the host,
yeah,
and then I'll be the co-host.
yeah.
The phoning it in.
It's just, yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. Like one of us is not wearing a hat and the other one doesn't have a beard, right?
Yeah, we'll have to shave and put on fake stuff
We can
every
just
other
go
week.
do it. We just go do the left one and just be mocking. We'd probably get more views.
Yeah, that's how you do it, and then we'll have like
Way bigger audience than what we have now. Right? Like, because all
I
we'd
think
have to
so.
do is
I
just
think
say
we
everything
could.
they want to hear. They'd be,
Yeah,
oh,
we
these
just
guys are
basically
woke, dog. Watch
we
this
read off of
woke.
the CNN
Wendigo.
the CNN ticker. Hey, did you hear the news? Apparently there was a shooting or whatever, and we need to get to the bottom of this and how it's Trump's fault. And that's what we'll do is we'll talk about how Hillary Clinton is always right instead of Alex Jones, and we'll just have to find the contrary, like the totally opposite character for the ones that we support. And what's funny is you said You Had Me at Wendigo. Is that was going to be as soon as You Had Me at Bigfoot got shut down off of Twitter, I was just going to start one up called You Had Me at Wendigo, and it would still be You Had Me at Bigfoot stuff being promoted, but it would just be a different. Oh no, we're a totally separate thing, and I would create a new logo.
Mustache. I like the idea of it just us with mustaches, like fake mustaches. Like,
Yeah. I'll put a fake one over top of our normal
yeah,
mustaches.
yeah, yeah. It's just us with like, that's great, man.
King
Yeah, I like.
Kracker asked about that End of Days Radio. He has 22,000 followers on Twitter, but he follows 24,000, and that's kind of how you can tell, like, if somebody's a legitimate source or whatever, or a legitimate person to follow and receive your news from. Like, if they have comparable, or if they're an account that is to be sought after, right? If they have comparable following and followers, because then it just shows a sign of, like, at some point, if not recently, they did like a follow for follow game where they were just like following a shit ton of people and hoping that they would follow them back, and then every other day they would go back and unfollow the people that didn't follow them back, and then they build up this audience that way. It's a nonsense way to build followers, and that's how a lot of them have done it. And you can look at a lot of these blue check marks. Brooklyn Dad, for instance, look at that dude. That's how he built his following. That, and talking shit about Trump, which somebody actually said. Andrew Jurassic Weeb says CNN made money off of Orange Man Bad, which was proven this week with that Project Veritas video. Speaking of other current events, real quick before we transition to the actual episode, hopefully we get to today. How do you feel about boy, this is how I wanted the joke to start out, right? Boy, black people sure had a rough week this week, huh? Because of that dude that got shot by the chick. Because we had a couple black shootings or whatever by white officers, and then with the George Floyd nonsense or whatever.
I was gonna say, didn't they show that Joe, like, this was on that what's it called that we see, the break 911 break or whatever, and it's like they've discovered that it wasn't from him being choked, like he didn't die from that.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't die from being asphyxiated or whatever. He died because he was on drugs. He was fucking twacked out trying to steal a banana. Like, or was it a banana or something? He wrote a bad check, right?
He wrote a bad check. He was trying to buy a banana and a pack of Newports with, this is not a joke, I'm telling you just facts. He was trying to buy a banana and a pack of Newports with a counterfeit $20 bill. And which was especially funny to me because the news they were like, oh, he was trying to buy a pack of cigarettes. Never once did they mention that he was buying a banana too. And why didn't they? Because they wanted to avoid that, because this is kind of like that reverse racism stuff where they're like, well, we don't want to look racist, so we're not going to talk about the banana. But that tells me that the first thing they thought was, well, he's a black guy and he was buying a banana, and so that he's a monkey, like that just plays into that whole thing.
Yeah.
So
the
fact that they had a round table about that, and they were like, we should just not talk about the banana because people are going to make fun of him and call him a monkey. The fact that came out of somebody's mouth as a preemptive type thing at the CNN round table tells me everything that I need to know about CNN and their round tables. But we all knew that. We all knew that there's
funny though, like the whole bad check thing. Like I know we've talked about George Floyd in detail before, but the bad check thing, like what did he think it was going to work or something?
I think he was just so messed up that he didn't care, or he didn't, like, he was looking at it, you look at
right?
You look at that $20 bill when you're all fucked up on fentanyl, and you're going to be like, oh, that's a $20 bill for sure. Because, like, I've looked at shit when I was inebriated, right? Or under the influence of something. And I was like, oh, this looks right to me. And how would you know any better? How would you be able to, like, you're not of a state of mind in which you can make those determinations. And obviously George Floyd had a significant amount of fentanyl, as we know from the medical examiner's report.
He was impaired. Not only was he regularly impaired as a person, but he was also impaired by the fentanyl. I told my dad the other day, I was ranting to him about all this stuff. I was like, the government this, like how I was doing earlier, the government this and the government that and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, they made George Floyd look like he's Rosa Parks, dude. Can you believe this?
Yeah.
This guy that was twacked out on fentanyl. They've got like more, what do they call them? Memorials and paintings and stuff of him all over the place. And George Floyd Day, and like, what the fuck? Like, this dude has like a legacy, and he should not. Like, if anybody should not, like, the best thing for society and the world is if the George Floyd had just been like wiped off the face of the, like, no, nobody ever speak of him again. He
Yeah.
was a horrible human being, you know, worthless to society, like did nothing but cause problems. Like, at like, bottom line, this guy was consistently a shitty person, right? Like, that is something that we can all agree on. I think he was a shitty person.
Yeah.
You know, even you could say this to a Black Lives Matter, and they'd go, "He was black, dude. He was black." Yeah, but he was still a shitty person. Like, he's still. Would you not agree that like, they would have to concede that holding a gun to a pregnant lady is a dick move, right? That's a dick move. And if they can agree on that, then we can agree that, you know, if you can't agree on that, then you're retarded. There's something wrong with you. You have a problem with ethics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're not a human being. You're a savage, right?
I have yet to hear somebody make a compelling argument that George Floyd didn't deserve to die, other than, oh, he was a human being, right? Like, all humans are entitled to life. I don't think that's true, but I think at a certain point, a line in the sand, right? That if you cross it, your life no longer matters to me. Like, and if you die. So, for instance, we kind of brought this up in the Discord, right? I said something about this whole Dante Wright, I think is his name, Dante Wright, being shot by a white cop accidentally because she thought it was a taser. I mean, we've heard all about this, and this is Minnesota's strike too. In the middle of their murder court case for the previous one, right, last summer, and I thought this couldn't have played out any better, right? This whole Dante Wright thing. So this kid, I say kid, right? Because I'm indoctrinated by the news. People have been, oh, this kid. This
Right.
man, this grown man who has a kid of his own, was a criminal. He had a criminal history, and he had an outstanding warrant. Which, if you've ever been, if there's a warrant out for you, that means the police need to take you in, right? And if for no other reason than to settle everything. Now, it might have been a traffic ticket. I don't know. It might have been armed robbery, which I believe the actual charge that he had an outstanding warrant for was he was a suspect in an armed robbery. But let's not get into that. Anyways, this guy was killed by a white female cop who has now been arrested. Well, she resigned, and then she was arrested, and she's being charged with manslaughter. To me, that whole situation could not exist, and it would have the same effect on me that it has now. Because I don't care about female cops, and I don't care about criminals. So, like, it
So
took
it's a
two of
win.
them off the street. You know, who cares? Like, okay. Like, if you want my attention, you're going to have to do better than that. Because, frankly, these are two types of people that I have no sympathy for. And you know, a negligent female cop, no less. Like, there are some female cops that I'm sure are fantastic and wonderful, but I've yet to meet them. And frankly, this chick pulled out a gun instead of her taser, which should be another like reason for like anti-Glock guys like myself, because the Glock is very boxy and shaped a lot like a taser. So when you hold, I'm sure you could make the case, and a good lawyer probably will, I'm sure her lawyer will, that the shapes are very similar, and it was absolutely an accident. So to get her some kind of like manslaughter in the third or whatever, so like, and hopefully she'll get off pretty easy, just because I want it to like, I want to rub the salt in that wound a little bit more in the Minnesota, and I feel for our friends up in Minnesota right now, because they are you know, they all have to deal with that
Yeah, we
crap.
got a couple buddies up there. You know, interestingly, I noticed Andrew Otaku said in the chat, my old buddy, my buddy Jurassic Weeb, who is a weeb as like myself, we've bonded on a level that you can't understand, man, because you're not a weeb. But anyways, he mentioned that at least you guys don't deny you've got slight racist streaks. And I wouldn't say, like, I was thinking about that the other day because we had to come out that we were racist to get ahead of doxing at one point. At one point we did that. And like, to us, racism isn't just towards one specific group. It's all of us, like everybody has stereotypes and things that are funny, even white people, I assure you, and Mexicans. In fact, I find Hispanic like stereotypes are hilarious. But you know what's great about Hispanics and their stereotypes is we all love our stereotype. We like embrace it. And so when you make jokes about like liking beans and like being like Speedy Gonzalez, we're like, yeah, dude, that's our heritage, bro. Like that's how we are, right? Like brown pride or whatever. And I think it's funny, like our my race, I guess, to like put myself in that, although I rarely do. My race says that often. Like we laugh about all the other races, going, "Why do you guys hate each other for these reasons that you are? Like you are these things. Why do you not just embrace it?" And I've met white people that embrace their whiteisms and they think it's funny. And I hung out with black dude when I was younger. I hung out with the urban crowd. I hung out with black people more than anything. And a lot of the black dudes that I knew, they embraced that shit and they thought it was hilarious. They were just like me. Like it's funny. Like you don't realize that there are people in other races that are just like you until you get out there and see the world and go to other cultures and like immerse yourself in them and go, holy shit, this person's just like me, except they have like, slanty eyes or something. You know what I mean? Like, and it's true, dude. Like, you can't just assume. That's the blanket statement, right? The logical fallacy is like you can't just assume that everybody is that way because not everybody is, and it's very like small-minded and petty and like immature and unintelligent to just assume that everybody in that race is like that one stereotype. Is that a good? Would you agree with that argument? Did I like? Was that a good, like, solid?
Yeah.
Back me up here.
Yeah, no, I agree. So here's the thing about racism, right? It's funny, and there's no denying that it's funny. It was funny for the millennia, right? It wasn't until what, like 10 years ago, that people started this whole notion of like, oh, whoa, 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 because you can even watch, what was that movie? Cabin Fever. It came out, I think, in the late '90s, early 2000s. And when all of a sudden you weren't allowed to say certain things, like this woke culture came about, and I was watching Cabin Fever, as I often do. I watch a lot of horror movies countless times.
Cabin Fever. Is that the one with Chris? What's his? No, that's Cabin Boy. I'm thinking
Yeah,
Cabin
you're
Boy.
thinking of Chris Elliott. No,
Yeah,
this
Chris
is
Elliott. I couldn't
Cabin
think.
Fever is the one where there's like this disease out in the woods, and then like it causes people to like start pieces of them falling off. Very graphic, like sex scene involving that. And I highly encourage anybody who likes gory horror movies to check it out if you haven't already. But there's a scene in it. The dude from Detroit Rock City, who plays like the Jay character, like from Jay and Silent Bob, in Detroit Rock City, he's in this movie, and he's still a very like dumb, kind of goofy guy. Somebody says, "Why are you going to go out and shoot squirrels?" And he says, "'Cause they're gay." And he's like, and then they're like, "What?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just kidding. I don't care if they're gay or what." And then and later on in the same movie, he says something like, "Well, that's retarded," and nobody questions any of this stuff. It happened, and people were like, "Oh, okay, all right, whatever." And that was just like how things were forever. Even with racism, you could be racist, and it was funny. Everybody laughed, regardless of who was the target. Even the targets of this racism, when it was done like laughingly, it was funny. Now, when you are funny and saying racist things or things that could be construed as racist, all of a sudden, and it's hardly ever the people who are the butt of the joke that get offended by it. It's people who are like the third parties, right? So like typically the left, the progressive wing of the liberals and just the Democratic Party, white people, college students, like that sort of stuff. But it's never like the target of this racism. Just like making gay jokes, rarely is it the gays that get upset by it, or the retarded. They never get upset. I mean, sometimes they can't. Sometimes they can't understand it. But the point is, like, when we make jokes about stuff, it's never like, oh, fuck the handicapped, or oh, fuck Mexicans. It's never that. It's always like, oh, you white people and your fucking Bob Seger, like, we'll make jokes, or, oh, look at Full House over here, and we'll make very obvious stereotypes about specific people, and it's funny to everybody. But except for this third party who gets involved, and that comes from, uh, if you, I know you'll remember this, but all the sexual harassment training that we received, they would always say sexual harassment is, uh, it's this, but it can be reported by anybody. It can be reported by the person who is the target, or it can be reported by a third party who was offended by it. So, if you pinch a girl's butt in the workplace and she laughs because you're flirting or whatever, or she giggles and she's okay with it, somebody else can actually say, "Hey, I saw Tom pinching Janet's butt earlier, and I'm offended. I'd like to lodge a sexual harassment complaint."
That is so lame. Yeah, that's true. That is fucking lame.
But that's how it was. That's how it is. Like when you report sexual harassment in the workplace, and the same is true with racism now. And it's especially a problem on social media because, I might make a joke to our friends of the show on the Twitter, and I might use the word retard, and we have many people, myself and you included, that suffer from mental illness. Rightfully, we could be upset by using the term retard, but we're not, because it's like, okay, ha ha ha, it was a funny joke. It's not like we're being hateful.
To me. It's such a great word to describe someone that's stupid.
And,
or something that's stupid. It doesn't have to be a person. Like things can be retarded.
Yeah. Like why is this?
And in fact, can be retarded.
That's retard is to slow down, right? So there are retardants, and you can retard something. But people, it's the people who get on Twitter and they search for keywords, right? They'll look for okay, what word am I going to report today? And they'll type in faggot into the search thing, and any post that has the word faggot in it, they'll report that person. And that's how I ended up getting caught not too long ago when I got suspended, because I said something. I think I said fag and retard in the same post. And
shit.
Yeah, and somebody was like, "Oh, got him." And that's the people who are reporting. I sincerely doubt the people that are reporting tweets and getting us suspended are the people who are actually should be or have every right to be impacted by it.
We've talked about this before, right? We've had this conversation where you can call somebody retarded, but I guarantee you, actual mentally retarded people, they don't even know what that means. They can't fathom what the word retarded or being offended by being called the word retarded. So it's other people that are offended by the word retarded, not actual retarded people, right? Could you imagine an interview? They're all, this man said retarded, and then there's a mentally retarded person, and they're like, how do you feel about this man saying that you're retarded? He would just go,
I like turtles. They don't care. They're like, whatever.
Yeah.
They've got other things to worry about.
Do something, because he can't speak either. It's just gibberish. Is that messed up? Is that offensive?
No. And
or when you're a kid and you tell your buddy, you go, put your hand like this, and then try to bite your ear.
Yeah. Try to lick your
and
shoulder.
And it makes them look like they're retarded. Yeah. Yeah.
They
they're
those are the people too that they want to be aborted, right? They don't want us to be able to say retard, but they also don't want retards to exist, right? So who's worse? The people who want genocide of the retards, or people who want to just say the word retard? I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm speaking objectively. Who's worse? The people who want to genocide the retarded. But that comes from a position of that's human life you're trying to snuff out, whereas these other dudes are just, they're just saying a word.
I have a skewed view on that, dude. And I hate to be the Adolf Hitler of the chat today, but I think that invalids are such a pain in the ass on society. They're such a pain in the ass to take care of. And I'm not saying all sick people should die or anything like that. I'm just saying there's a point when it's look, we spend a lot of money taking care of these people that don't contribute to society at all. You know what I mean? And it's kind of frustrating for those of the people that do have to work in society,
I get
I
it.
don't know. Like I said, it's an unpopular opinion, but I think it's frustrating that we have to, like, especially with the government we have right now,
Well, let me
taking
ask
care,
you this. Let
paying for
me
people's prophylactics and shit.
let me ask you this then. Who gets to decide who is going to be the target of this genocide campaign? Like if we were to say are you pro or anti genocide, and you would say that you're pro genocide in some cases, right? You would say that that's
Okay.
true.
Yeah,
Would you agree to that?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna come clean with you, dude.
All
This
right.
and this is my unpopular side, right? Belief is I'm something of a misanthrope, which we all know. I'm the hikikomori that hates people and lives alone. And I think that like we are overpopulated, dude. We have a lot of loafers and people that don't contribute to society that we're taking care of. And it's kind of a pain in the ass for our society to progress. Like we've got these criminals out there like ruining cities and like burning cities down. We've got like mentally retarded people that we have to take care of, people with health issues that we have to take care of, lazy people that don't want to do shit that we have to like take care of with welfare and food stamps and all this stuff because they don't know how to be a part of society, right? Which stems back to whatever, right? It always stems back to parents. But because these people don't know how to be a part of society or contribute to the greater whole, or at least like my idea isn't that we are all a society. My idea is that we progress technologically and biologically or evolve, right? The goal is to evolve, like to become superior, homo superior, we'll call it. Like that's the goal in my eyes. Like, and I
Is
know
that
that's
your
right.
superhero name?
That's my superhero need. Yeah. And so, no, superhero name. Is what you say?
Yeah, yeah, you're Homo superior.
Yeah, that's my superhero name. Good one, dude. Good burn. You guys.
Good one.
The topic. So the goal is to, for me personally, my goal is to evolve. And the only way to do that is through technology advancements and biological advancements. Go ahead. I know you want to.
Was hat er daraus gemacht?
I know you want to do it. And so with like, okay, and like my argument with Hitler is like, he had the idea, he was moving in the right directions with the whole eugenics. Like that was correct, I think. Like we can start getting rid of our bad genes. Like we can do that kind of stuff now. They call them designer babies, right? And
Yeah, we do it with
and
puppies.
I think that our progress is being impeded by lazy people and like people that aren't contributing to society, or they're taking down our ethics and our system because they have some beef that's like petty as shit. Like what we were just talking about, this racism shit is so fucking petty to me. Like here we are, 2000 and fucking 21, like literally like the future, right? Like this is what they talk about in the movies back in the day. Like remember Back to the Future? The future was 2012. We're past that, bro. We are in the fucking future now. Like we have all those advancements and we have all those things available to us so that we can progress as a society to the type 2 society, right? Where we can start really reaching for the stars, and like becoming a universal society, galaxy society, or whatever you call it, Star Wars, the Phantom Brouhaha or
Phantom
whatever.
Menace. Get it
Yeah, that's
right.
the one. Yeah. And so what I'm saying is, and I'm not saying like I would choose to who lives and who dies, but I am saying that I do agree that we're overpopulated, and I do agree that there are human beings on this earth that are just wasting oxygen. Like that's the best way that I can put it. I'm not going to sit here and say we need to kill all the Jews or we need to kill all this specific race. I'm saying there are human beings out there that do not contribute to the betterment of society, and they are a stain. They're a stain on human as like an idea, like we're just like letting them exist, and we shouldn't,
So no, no, no,
honestly.
no, no. I agree with you, and you're preaching to the choir. My
Okay.
question is, who gets to decide who is the target of this genocide? So, like, we would say, you and I could come up with a list, but who are we? We're just a couple of assholes. And we could justify it at great lengths, like, hey, this will save the environment. It'll save the, not that you care about the environment, but
Yeah.
we can save all this money. We can actually like use all this area that, look at all this room for activities, assuming we're able to like get
Yeah.
rid
Yeah.
of all this shit.
Sure.
If we can get rid of all this blight, this human blight, Like, we will be way better off. And then we present that to the powers that do make these decisions. Who's to say, and say they even get the buy-in of the people, like, hey, we're going to start this mass eugenics program, and we're going to save the environment, we're going to save money, we're going to create new openings, we're going to be fine as a human race. And they get the buy-in of everybody, and everyone's like, okay, all right, I like this. I like where this is going. It makes sense. Now, we have no say in who gets to live and who doesn't, right? That's the powers that be. They're the ones that they've officially got the buy-in from the people. They've gotten everything approved. Now they get to decide who's gone. And let's say they make it people who are, I don't know, right now, obviously, we have Biden in charge. So naturally, they would go to this position of, well, the people of color have always been oppressed. And let's not even go there. Let's say just black people. I think we owe it to the black people of our nation to take out X percent of, let's even it out so that we have an equal percentage demographics wise of the various culture, the various races, right? So we'll have 25% Asian, 25% white, 25% Hispanic, and 25% black. And then the subcategories within each. They say that's how we're going to do it, and we're going to do it this way. We're going to get rid of anybody who, I don't know, if you are not under the age, or if you're not over the age of 65, you have to be employed, gainfully employed, and in these particular places. Otherwise, you're first on the chopping block. If you don't have these skills that we need, and you can't fit into this particular category, you're the first on the chopping block. Also, if you don't make more than this amount in your current employment, you're out because you're considered blight. Let's say you have this medical condition, which is totally, something that's treatable, but is quite frankly a drain on the medical system. Cancer. Okay, we'll just say cancer, just as starters, because they're naturally going to get, until they can whittle us down to that proper number, they're going to start with the higher things. They're going to say anybody who has cancer, regardless of your position or where you are in treatment, you're out. Anybody who has any kind of genetic disease, you're out. Anybody who hasn't vaccinated, doesn't have all their vaccinations, you're out. That's how they would do it, and we wouldn't be able to say anything because they've already got our buy-in, right?
Hey, do you think this guy, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Please.
Do you think this guy, I lack tact, is actually I love God?
No, he said who it was, and I saw who it was.
I know, but you could do that. You could easily just say, like, have you noticed I love God hasn't posted anything in between?
Yeah, I do notice that he's gone. No, I lack tact. He's the fella that I watch his streams. So different guy. I know for a fact.
So, okay, then back to the conversation. Do you think what you're saying is like, who's the Thanos? Who gets to be the Thanos?
Right.
Well, here's what I think.
Thanos wasn't even the Thanos. Thanos did it just every other person. Like, he lined everybody up and just fired around or whatever.
That was really the unbiased way to do it, is just half of it. But yeah. I don't think that's a good way to do it, because you still leave criminals and shit.
Right.
Here's what I would do. And let's say I'm president of the United States, or whoever gets to do this. I would make everybody take an IQ test. And if you didn't score above 140 IQ, that's it. You're done. Like, done. Like, that's it. Sorry. You better have 140 or above.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, if you were president, that's the thing. That's fine. Like, I don't care how it's done, because I'm not the guy who makes that decision, and I would just have to roll with it or rebel. But the thing is, we're not that guy right now. So if this were something that happened, we'd have no say in it. So we can sit here and talk about how great this and this idea is, but imagine this became a thing, and we had nothing to do with it. Yeah, Buzz is like, what the fuck?
I was laughing at that. I only said 140 because I'm 145. So that puts me,
I don't even think I'm
good.
Anywhere near
I only
there.
did that because I knew I'd be good.
I don't think I'm anywhere. I wouldn't be competitive in this. So We need to lower it significantly. I think it should start out at 100, and if we're not at a number, that's what you got to do is incrementally get higher, right? Because I think it should start out as just criminals, right? That's the great way to do it. Is just, oh, if they're criminals, line them up and shoot them. Period. If you've got say you've got a felony, or have ever had a felony, you're gone. That would be a great way to start, and then you take inventory of what you have left, and you're like, well, we don't have any felons anymore. Let's start with some of the more violent misdemeanors, right? Because you can have a domestic abuse that's a misdemeanor, right? All right, let's take the domestic abusers in, line them up and shoot them, take inventory. And I think it would have to go in that way. And what would end up happening is you'd have people who know that they're next on the chopping block. They would flee, right? And they would leave. They wouldn't want to be anywhere. They'd go underground. We wouldn't have to deal with them anymore. And then you'd have like these, you'd create jobs too, because you'd have to create squads to go and round up all these people. So that could be your thing, but that would be my opinion on it.
You'd have to trick people. You have to trick people into doing it. You could trick people into doing it, like easily with the media. You could call it something like friendly, and then like tell them that if they haven't scored this, we're going to take care of you, and we're going to send you to a farm up north. You know what I mean? Like you were a kid and you told them like it's going to be something good, but it wasn't.
That's true. That's true.
Which is, I'm sure what they did with the Jews.
Well, yeah, I think they were. No, I think they just told them, "Hey, buddy, get on the train. You're going to." And I think they had heard about it. So,
could you imagine Hitler like explaining? He's like, "We'll tell them there's going to an amusement park." Or like they're gonna go see the circus.
Ilac Tack makes a. That's how it probably. I'm sure a lot of them knew what was going on, and then I think that's why they were hiding under floorboards and in porta potties and shit, and instead of because they didn't want to go to these concentration camps. They didn't seem like a very pleasant place to go, especially since like Grandma had gone and never came back. But Ilac Tact, he makes a point here. He says, "What's the IQ average in America and Africa? Find out for me, Tom." And it's funny because Europe, Europe, the Caucasian countries, right? They all do all right on IQ tests. When you start to look at, South America, Africa, the Middle East, many of those nations in the Middle East, you start to see that this IQ test doesn't play out as well. I mean, I think like 70 something was the average for a lot of those countries, and which is borderline retarded. And and I think a lot of people argue that they're just not good. They're not good test takers, and you're like, well, the IQ test, it's not like a test of knowledge is the thing about the IQ test.
Good test taker.
Yeah, well,
you're not smart.
Well, yeah, it's like Daniel Tosh said. He's like, oh, I'm not a good test taker. Oh, you mean you have a hard time demonstrating what knowledge you have? Like the things that you know? Like, yeah. But the IQ test isn't even like a standardized test like that. It's not like how much information do you know. It's how well does your brain work. And it's based off of patterns and just noticing shit like that. So anyways, we should probably get on to the topic at hand.
Are we going to actually do our topic today?
We need to, because...
What are you toasting to today?
I don't know. To hoping I have 140 IQ test if you ever become president.
If you were 139, I'd let you in. I'd be like, all right.
I appreciate that.
I'd cover for you. I'd be like, he's good.
He's with me. Now let him in. Man.
So what are we talking about? We have do we have the video? Can we do the video opening and then actually do our show? Like, or are you going to do the chat?
No, we can do that. I can say hi to. Well, let's start at the beginning. If I say your name twice, please bear with me. James Pregler, Jay Coob, Jordan Davis, Mike in Manitoba, Sharon, always a pleasure to have Sharon in the chat. And we got Jurassic Weeb, King Kracker, Buzz Busby, I know I saw him here too. And I think that's about it. And then I lack tact. I love tact and I lack God. Those two. No, I lack tact. Thank you as always for joining. I think he feels guilt. I think he feels guilted into coming and watching the show because I'll go and I'll watch him stream. So he's like, well, I owe them that much. I guess I should go and chat during the live stream. Let's go ahead and do the opening M files.
Laugh about it.
Yeah. No, that's not funny. Doggone it. And we burst out into laughter. All right. Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah,
so the
you
pyramids, huh?
It was like 3 weeks we've been trying to do this.
You know, it reminds me of that whole thing with South Park when they were trying to like find out who Cartman's real dad was, and then they like for like weeks. And this is not a lot of people will remember this because a lot of you guys were too young to have been watching South Park as it was airing. But for like, they were like, next week we find out who, or on the next episode of South Park we find out who Cartman's dad was. Who was Cartman's dad, or who is Cartman's real dad? And then like it ended, and then the next week they did like a Terrence and Phillip special, and then the next week they did some like infomercial or something. Like they purposely stretched it out for as long as they could, and then finally they were like, oh, all right, we'll give you the fuck. And a lot of us were furious about it. We were young and full of ire and piss and vinegar, right? We were like, show us who's Cartman's dad? Like we cared back then.
And then it ended up just being her, like she's a hermaphrodite or something.
Yeah. It ended up being like a real lazy thing. But they were doing like who is Cartman's dad? And then they were like, who? And then it was like some other mystery within the show. They were like, who did take Stan's tricycle or whatever? Who did? And it was a Roger Rabbit. They were like, who framed Roger Rabbit? Doing that shit.
That's such a good bit. So are we going to actually talk about the pyramids thing? We have actually a couple of good topics to talk about. Like we have like this M-Files thing was a good idea because there's a few other topics coming up that I'm excited to talk about. And we haven't gotten around to them because we're fucking jabronis that have just been like bullshitting, So now we're finally here and we're going to be able to talk about it. And, I'm going to pass the mic to you because I didn't do any research, and I was going to watch Stargate, but, I watched the Aqua Teen episode instead with the Universal Remonster with the Fargate.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same thing. That's pretty much all the information I have. Speaking of, people in the chat last week were, as I spiral out of the conversation again, I still have my notes pulled up for Pyramid, so if we get to it, hopefully we'll get to it. But last week somebody asked in the chat if aliens what was our official opinion here at You Had Me at Bigfoot. You know what, I'm gonna put off pyramids again this week because I think this is a legitimate question. They wanted to know the official You Had Me at Bigfoot position on aliens, whether or not, and as you know, we have a lot of Christians, very like Orthodox and some devout and some aspiring or some leaning towards Christianity. We have a lot of Christians in the chat, and some of these guys, these are the types of guys who are like, they're better Christians than I am, because even they are like, well, dinosaurs weren't real, right? Like they're that kind of Christian where they're just like, no, we understand the creation theory to be the legitimate theory, and in that theory there are no dinosaurs 65 million years ago. The Earth did not exist 65 million years ago, right? So these are the types of people who like refuse to acknowledge anything outside of the Bible, which is beyond my, like, where I'm at in my faith, I'm still working on that. So I can always appreciate a very devout Christian. They ask, are aliens extraterrestrial beings from another planet or another, or what? Or are they demons or angels, right? They wanted to know the official...
Are you telling me that somebody asked you what our official stance is on something? Like specifically the stuff about aliens?
Yeah.
So
this
was
a
like
legitimate...
something...
Whoever it was in the chat that asked it last week, please ask it again. It might have been King Kracker, but they wanted to know what our official opinion was on aliens, whether or not, or what aliens actually are. Go ahead, V.
So we have to address that then, obviously, right?
That's why I'm saying we got to put pyramids off another week.
If we're gonna, that's something that we should probably talk about. If you want my opinion on what I think aliens are, I honestly don't think aliens exist. I mean, if you want to know, like, really what I think, like, my honest opinion, I don't think they exist, certainly not in our galaxy. And that's because of the great filter, right? The great filter of civilization. Whatever keeps us from getting to type 2 civilization. We've seen other planets, and there hasn't been like signs of like other civilizations or anything like that. And so to me, that says we're the ones that have made it the farthest. And I like that idea because there's so much cosmic shit that can like wipe you out of existence, like my wandering black holes. I fucking am terrified of those because one day it could just, gobble up your planet and that's it. And like that, it's
You
funny
would
that we
never
don't,
know.
well, yeah, well, you wouldn't, yeah. But we don't think about that. Like that's not something that people lie in bed going, "Oh my God, we could be obliterated in a second by a roaming black hole." Like that's not something people think about or people know about. Even I'm sure there's people out there that they go, "I don't know what that is," or would rather not think about it. But to me, that's the most terrifying thing is just not knowing and all of a sudden not existing. Like even, figuring out how to achieve immortality, like that's nothing, man, if you get obliterated out of existence. Like that, you know what I mean? Like, fuck, what happens? Who knows? A black hole could be sending you to another dimension. Who knows what that could be? In terms of aliens, though, I think, I don't have any evidence personally to say that I do agree there's aliens. I really like the Bob Lazar stuff. I like his account of what happened in alien technology, but that's not enough to prove to me that aliens exist. And if they did, I think maybe they're coming from other dimensions or something because, and who knows, really there too. Like that's where you go, well, I don't know because I don't know that much about science and like dimensions, and we haven't discovered other dimensions yet either because we haven't done that much in the
Well,
progress of like,
we have done
tell
that.
me.
So,
Are you
um,
talking about the collider? We talked about that too, right? The collider.
no, that is nonsense. Don't worry about the hadron collider or whatever, um, because I don't know what's nobody knows what's going on with that. But that could ultimately rip open a whole thing into another dimension. But we've already discovered dimensions that go backwards, right? That was the most recent discovery. Was we've found a dimension that is completely opposite ours, and it is flowing backwards. Like we have the rays coming towards us. They discovered this alternate dimension in which the rays are going away from us. So they've come to this realization, and it's obviously far more complex than that. But they've come to this realization that this other dimension that they've been able to witness is playing in reverse from what ours is. So they scientists have discovered these other dimensions, and dimensions again. You start to think about dimensions like, oh, there's there's however many dimensions, right? It again, that's it's far more complex than that, right? Because we have different types of dimensions that we have an understanding to some degree of right now. And these are the ones that scientists are working on and have some evidence, enough evidence to play with that they exist, right? And in these are dimension types. So when we're talking about dimension types, we're talking about like the x and y axis, and then we're talking about the z axis, right? The 3D, what gives everything the third dimension, what gives you shape, but then also the fourth dimension being time, because without time, any amount of time, that thing cannot exist, even if it's a nanosecond, right? So those are the four no shit dimensions, and then you've got dimensions beyond that where it's like dimensions that are similar to ours, that are almost identical to ours in every single way. Then you've got dimensions that started at a different point than we did, or at a different time than we did, that started with different values or different physics laws than we did, that started with different in different places than we did, ones that are further along than we are. So you get to this point where you've got all these dimensions, and there's a finite number of them as far as I can tell. Everything that I've actually read that's rooted in science has told me that there is a finite number of dimensions, even the theoretical multiple world theory, right? But there's a finite number of dimensions. But these dimension types, that's what you kind of need to wrap your head around first, and then you can realize that there are dimensions that are like ours that started at different times than ours, which are further along than we are, for instance. So when it comes to, there was a video that I saw not too long ago, and it's a fictional video, but it's a fake interview that they had with an alien, and they were talking to this alien, and they're like, well, what are you? Where are you from? And he's like, well, Earth. And he's like, what do you mean? Well, I traveled from the future, from a different time than you, but I am an evolved human. And they were like, so you evolved from humans? And he said, yes. And so that, to me, I think that the universe is already a very complex entity, right? We don't understand the universe. Even Heisenberg said it's not that, or the universe is not only stranger than we think, it's stranger than we can think,
Yeah.
right?
It's funny you mentioning that theory about like the or what you call it, fiction, where aliens are actually humans from the future.
Right, right.
I could get behind that more than I could them being from like other dimensions or like another planet. Like if you told me that aliens, the definition of an alien wasn't a being from another planet, but just another being that we don't understand or know what it is, from some other reality or whatever, then I would say, yeah, right. And so that begs the question of the definition of alien, like what we define as alien, right? And I guess the popular term would be a creature from another planet, right? The fucking grays, right? From another planet, they come down in flying saucers. Like that's this consensus among the popular popular belief, is that that's what an alien is. And if that's the question, is like, do aliens exist? The grays, the fucking, or what are they? Then I'm more inclined to say, yeah, they're probably just humans from another alternate reality or something. Because as far as my belief, right, and this is where I get into my things that I don't understand and I just believe, right? Because rarely do I say that. I believe that we're the only ones out here. I think that's it. I think it's just us. And I like to think that because that kind of makes us seem a little special. That we are the ones that have survived the dangerous ass fucking cosmos. We're the ones that somehow got lucky and
This
a
is a
meteor
bad
didn't.
neighborhood, dude.
Yeah, a bad neighborhood. A meteor didn't obliterate our planet. We managed to be the one planet like furthest from the sun, right? And not farthest from the sun, but just enough to where we can have life on this planet. Like that's kind of lucky, right? To be able to be that planet and have life
Lucky,
exist.
right?
Somehow, yeah, lucky. Yeah,
That seems
somehow.
pretty lucky, right?
Yeah,
Like
and if you go,
scientifically,
yes,
like would you? So here's my, I'm one to err on this. I'm like, okay, science, I get it. I get your math. I don't get the math, but I understand that you understand the math, right? And the fact that you understand the math and you can sit here and tell me that we are so lucky that all these very scientific explanations that you've just given me just happened to be, right? Like they just so happened. We're so lucky. But then you can turn around and say, there's no luck. There's no such thing as luck. Luck is, that's non-existent. We don't use that word in science, right? Like that to me, that raises a, I like that you said luck because it gave me a chance to be Pastor Tom for a moment,
right,
and
right. Well,
and
that's what
and force that on
and
people.
I was going to address the theology. I was
Okay,
I was
all
going
right.
to say, and if you believe that it was God, then that makes it even more interesting, right? Like maybe we are that. Like let's say that is what I believe. Let's say I believe that there is a God and that we were created by Him. That then that would make us even more special because we're His children, right? We're the only ones that He thought, you know what? I'll give this planet out of all the cosmos. I'll give this one planet a go ahead, and we'll see what they can come up with. And like that was it. He was just like, check it out. Like here's what I'll do. And like you have to like, and that's where I go. That's why I always say I'm agnostic, not atheist, because I have to think that there's something divine or out of our control that is protecting us from wandering black holes and gigantic fucking meteors and like God size, like what is the Galactica from the
Yeah,
Marvel?
that'd be
Like
terrifying.
like could you imagine Galactica showing
No,
up like next to Earth? Like we'd be done. Or even like Rick and Morty, show me what you got. Right, like something like that shows up, we're screwed, right? So somehow, at least over the course of civilization, we'll say the past 1,000 years, like not even that long, like in the past 1,000 years there hasn't been an ELE, right? You know what an ELE is, right?
Yeah, the extinction level event.
Yeah, extinction level event. We haven't had one of those at least in 1,000 years. That's like we need one of those signs like no ELE since. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
1,000 years,
And then
1,000
somebody
years.
erases it at some point because we just had one.
Yeah, they're like, oh, dinosaurs had the ELE, so they're going.
Yeah, it's been longer than 1,000 years. I hate to tell
Right.
you.
That's my point. That's my point. Is it's been that long, so like that's where I factor luck in. Like it's either luck or it's divine intervention that our fucking planet has had life for at least billions of years. You know, like if I'm saying like that's how long the world has existed or life on Earth since fucking the organism that split in the water and walked up on land or whatever, or since God created the Earth, right? Either or, the fact of the matter remains is that we haven't been wiped out of existence, and that's got to account for something,
Do
right?
you ever
So
like?
like I imagine that if there were, like, I'm not saying there isn't, or if there were, maybe they weren't so lucky or they didn't have God protecting them, and so there's other civilizations that were obliterated, but we don't have any remnants of those from the stuff that we've seen, so who
Well,
knows
so
really.
here's my question to you then. Um, Now, if imagine with me, if you will, because I kind of like laid very like vague groundwork, like, oh, these dimensions started at different points than we did, right? Um, and so the dimensions typically don't interact with one another. Imagine it this way. So this has become you had me at the multiverse, right? I know you wanted to talk about this. Uh,
Yeah,
so
we've been dying to talk about the multiverse.
so fuck it, we'll do it today. We'll do it
Yeah, we've
live.
been dying.
Um, uh, so these dimensions don't typically interact with one another, and a lot of people believe that that's where ghosts come from. That's one argument for ghosts and demons and angels and this and that and the other is this multiverse, right? And
Right.
when I say that that these universes, these dimensions started at different times, because that's one of the types of dimensions, is one that they started at different times, but they have the same trajectory that we do. Everything is exactly the same. It just started at a different time. That might be it started 10 minutes before we did, or what we perceive to be minutes, right? The amount of
See, and that's,
the
oh man.
hold on, let me
Oh,
finish.
go ahead.
Uh, but what we perceive to be 10 minutes, and then there are some that started maybe 400 billion years before ours. So they're
Right.
the same exact universe, but they're 400 billion years in the future. So those end up. So this is why when I say that aliens are not necessarily interstellar, they're
Right.
interdimensional, and
Yeah.
they travel because there are also, if they can move from one dimension to another, there are dimensions that scientists have identified as part of this uh, dimensional chart that they have, that some of them just don't have the same rules of
So
physics that
yeah.
we do, right?
Right. Right.
So
So if
they're
that's
able to do a
your
lot different.
if that's what you're saying and that's your definition of what you're saying aliens are, then I have to concede and say, well, then if aliens do exist, they're not from other planets, mind you. Like that's if that's your idea of what an alien is, that's not what an alien is. If there are aliens from other dimensions, then I can't refute that because I can't say that or not whether I've seen inside another dimension. And that's also why, like, this is what I wanted to mention earlier, was that's also why I can't refute like the existence of heaven or hell, is because my logic on that is if they exist, those are other dimensions. Like remember when we were a kid and you thought heaven was in the sky, right?
Right,
Like heaven is
right,
the
right.
clouds and it's the sky. You go up into the sky. Well, we know that that's not where heaven is because we've seen past there, right? You could look up into the sky and go, well, I don't see nothing up there on a clear day, right? And then obviously the other stuff, like, I mean, we don't want to get too much into like flat earth or anything like that now, but that we know that that's not where heaven is because there's a moon up there and there's the universe, right? So if heaven and hell exists, to me that says they have to be in other dimensions, right?
I would agree. And also, have fun at work, Sharon. Thank you
Oh
for
yeah, I
tuning
see
in.
that. Yeah.
She's like the only one that we address when she has to leave. Everyone else is like, all right, see you guys later. And we're like,
Yeah.
all right, fuck off.
She's,
No,
she's
I'm
going through a
kidding.
tough time right now, poor thing. Yeah, and I hate to get off topic, but she's going through a tough time right now. Her dad's sick, and so for those of you that are religious, give a prayer out for my girlfriend's dad. He's real sick. He's like not doing too good. It's like bad. So I didn't mean to like
Well, you know what?
ruin the
I'm gonna do it right here on the show. I'm gonna do it right here. So everybody, bow your heads. All right.
You're really gonna pray?
I'm gonna pray for Sharon's
Oh
dad.
God, we're gonna pray. All right, I'll bow my head.
All right. I appreciate that. Everybody, bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time to come together as friends. And right now, specifically, we'd like to address the fact that our friend, V's girlfriend and beloved friend of the show, her father's going through tough times. We pray that you'll watch over him, that you'll extend your healing hand, and you'll help the family as they come together and provide comfort for him in this tough time. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.
Man, that was damn decent of you, brother.
Well,
I appreciate that.
sometimes
Yeah,
this is my rule. All right.
she's having a tough time now. She'll like that we did that.
This is my rule. If somebody asks on Twitter as I'm scrolling and somebody says, "Hey, do me a favor, and if you're the praying type, pray for so and so," I'll stop and I'll pray for that person. So it
Yeah.
would be against my own personal just my own personal beliefs to not stop and pray for Sharon's father. So anyways, so my opinion on that whole thing with dimensions, I like how you talked about heaven and hell being a separate dimension. I think that there's something to that. I do think that there's a lot in Revelation that would lead me to believe that there is something in which heaven is going to come to this particular dimension. But I also think that when it comes to aliens, I think there's an argument to be made for aliens being angels or demons too. And if you look right now, what you were talking about, the extinction level events and the celestial bodies that intervene that allow us to be this organism that has been allowed to flourish this whole time, I think that aliens in some ways perhaps have, I think they could be demons. I think they could also be angels, right? Because we have a lot of alien interaction with human beings that seems to be positive, even from a scriptural standpoint, right? Where they help people, and not in a way where it's like, oh, we're giving you this forbidden knowledge, right? They're actually legitimately trying to help us to be better as people. For instance, some theories talk about how aliens have come in and told us to sign this nuclear treaty where we would just abolish like any kind of nuclear weapons before they would interact with us. And that to me sounds like a way to bring humanity together, which is, I think, like in line with scripture, right? But then also you have instances where aliens provide us with this, like the iPhone, right? We talked about this last week. And I think in those cases, I think that could be construed as forbidden knowledge, right? So I
Well,
think, go ahead.
I was gonna say, have you ever toyed with the idea? And I don't know if we talked about this before, but have you ever toyed with the idea that maybe like aliens just are angels or demons? And I don't mean like,
Yeah.
oh, they're all demons. I mean, what if that's what really people were seeing? Like the people that claim to have seen aliens, what if they were just seeing like an angel or a demon in those situations?
I think
Like,
that's
man, my
totally
dad,
legitimate.
I'd love to get my dad on here one day because my dad, he used to be a pastor or whatever. And like, we always have these like religious arguments where I give him I'm an agnostic and you can't prove anything to me. But he's very staunch in what he's still, but like he always says it's all a gamble. He always says it's all a gamble. You don't know, even if you're religious, you're still making a gamble. And he's seen some things that he can't explain. And like I always tell him, I would love to see things that I can't explain. I've never, experienced something spiritual or something paranormal, so that's something I like long for. But he has, like some stuff that like he was a missionary when they were, I don't know if I ever even told you this. My dad and my mom, when they first got married, they were missionaries. They went to like South America and like went around like preaching the gospel. Like this is what they did before they even had me. Like they didn't even have me and my sisters until they were in their late 20s because they were busy being missionaries. but he always tells me like he's seen some things that like he can't explain, and like I know you also have seen some things that you can't explain, and that isn't necessarily what led you to your faith, but it's definitely something that drives you. And so it begs the question of, you know, how fortunate are the people that do get to see aliens, quote unquote, right? That maybe they don't know what they're seeing, and that's their first reaction. And that's why I think there are a lot of people that see angels or demons, they know that's what they are, or in fact, it doesn't really matter what it is that people see in these paranormal or alien or spiritual experiences, because we can't define it because we don't know what it is when we see it, or those of you who have seen it. So you reach out for what you know, right? You got the people, they go to church all the time, maybe they saw an alien and they go, oh my god, it's an angel, right? Or maybe you've got the guy out in the fields that's like, humping his pig or whatever, and then something comes down to tell him to stop doing that, and he goes, "It was an alien. It was a beam of light. It was a beam of light," right? And
I want to
I don't know
say,
that
I want to
that
say,
makes a good question.
good
That's all I'm saying.
good luck at work, Chris. I know I don't want to like. I know I just said that whole bit about anytime anybody else leaves and we're like, fuck you. I will say, have a good night at work, Chris. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think,
It's
uh,
a valid theory. Like, would you say
no,
that's a valid theory?
I agree. I think so. We have, and this was kind of where I was going to go a little bit earlier about because people will say, well, no, that's not scriptural, right? Like saying that there are other dimensions, uh, because the Bible doesn't really talk about other dimensions in so many words. And granted, it was written by people in a time where they had a lack of understanding of these things. But uh, I think when you start to think about if you try to understand God, the more you try to understand God, the harder it is to wrap your head around a lot of that stuff. So I think God has a lot more going on than we'll ever really understand. And I've come to
Right.
terms with that, right? Like I don't sit here and say, well, if I don't understand it, it just doesn't exist, or like it can't be real, or what. If science can't explain it, then it can't be real. I just recognize the fact that God has more going on than we can understand, than we understand, than we can understand. So
Right.
for that reason, I kind of have to play the faithy guy who just kind of is like, well, you got to take it on faith, which I always hate when people do. but but that's a point where I'm like, well, if that's how you're going to approach this, then I can't do anything for you because you have to understand there are some things that we just won't be able to understand and we won't be
Right.
able to acknowledge. And even if you're going to, so you ask somebody, all right, grant me this, that there is a higher power that created the universe, just grant me that, okay, and made all these things happen. And they're like, okay, I'll give you that. And I say, now I need you to relinquish all your reigns, like all the shit that you like, everything that you understand, because you just admitted that science was wrong, right? Like that all this science that you've kind of like been dealing with your whole life has been wrong or at least misinformed. So if you're acknowledging that this higher power did this and your mathematical formulas have can kind of back that up, because realistically if you want to go the route of like they kind of coexist, um if you can go that route, at a certain point you have to realize, well, somebody, because science even admits they don't know what happened to create the Big Bang. So you've already admitted that you don't know what did it. You just know what happened since then. So if you can agree that it was done by a higher power, you have to at least understand that there's more to this universe than you understand. So when you start asking me questions about, well, how come such and such and I can't see it and prove it mathematically, I'm like, well, you can't even prove your own theory mathematically beyond a certain point. So
Right.
you're like, we're kind of at a stalemate here. And what you said about being able to see something that you can't explain, yeah, like I've in my time in ghost hunting or whatever, that's the thing. But here's the weird thing about faith: when you've committed to that, like at a certain point you just stop asking questions, not because you're trying to be ignorant, it's just because like you don't even think about it anymore. Like I know that 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? We all know that. and you just don't think about it anymore. Like, what are the fundamentals of 2 + 2 = 4? It's just a thing that we know, right? I know that if I jump up, I'm going to come back down in this environment, right? I know these things to be true. At a certain point, you just know that this is true, and that's kind of how faith works. Like, as you and I, granted, there are times where I lack faith in certain things, and I pray for faith because I need help. There are some times where I'm confronted with something where I'm like, help me out. Like, I don't know. But I need you to help me to continue to keep my faith strong, right? Because I'm being presented with this onslaught of evidence that is contradictory to what I am to believe, right? And so that kind of comes into play there too. You have to want faith, right? You have to want to believe it in order to believe it. And that's why it's very difficult dealing with people like you. And it's not. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that's fine. That's how, like, the neutral platform is.
I'm a difficult person to deal with, dude.
You are.
That's the bottom line.
You are, but it's not a bad thing. It just means that you have a neutral standpoint, and I have to try to convince you to want it. Like, I have to present to you in a way that you're like, okay, I want this, because I can't sit here and say, well, no, you've got to believe, because then you're going to be like, well, no, I'm fine without believing. Like, I've lived a perfectly fine life without believing, right? But for me to try to get you over that edge, it kind of creates this. There's a point where I have to be like, no, dude, you have to want it. And for me to, just like the exorcisms, right? You can't exorcise somebody who doesn't want to be exorcised. Like, I've been asked in the past, I've received correspondence from people who are like, I need you to exorcise my brother. And I'm like, okay, well, what does he have to say about this? And he's like, well, he doesn't know. Like, he doesn't know. I was like, so you want to tie him down? And I was like, that's not how it works. You have to want it. Like, I can't make you exercise, right? You have to want to exercise. No one can make you do that shit. No, I'm the same way, because I have a hard time getting motivated to exercise too. You have to want it, and you have to find a reason for it. So that's... Anyways, we're off topic a little bit here, but I think aliens, right?
I get what you're saying. But I have to push back a little, because it's not that I don't, like, believe anything. Like, that's, again, that goes to the atheism thing. I'm not an atheist. I'm an agnostic. And my side of the story is that I don't know what it is. Like, I can't claim that it's the God of Christianity or the Shinto God or whatever God, but I will agree. Like, that's the only thing I can agree on with, like, spirituality, is that there is something. There has to be. And, like, it's not just because our planet hasn't been obliterated off of the face of the earth in the past however billion years or 1,000 years. It's because I still exist. And, like, some of the stuff that I've been through, like, we were talking about this the other day in the Discord, like, some of the stuff that we've been through, right, is like, you kind of question, like, they call it survivor syndrome, when you come back and, like, you've experienced some shit, and you kind of don't know how to cope with why you survived, and you go, why is it that I still, like, all these other dudes, like, I remember being deployed, and, like, I had to do those cards for the KIA cards, and every time we had a casualty, I had to fill it out and go, okay, this person died, right? And then we replaced that soldier with another soldier for the slotting, right? And every single time it was, like, crazy. Like, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh shit, I know this guy. And then after a while, I kind of just desensitized, right? But there, like, you come home after, like, dodging IDF, and, like, I remember the day I got into Afghanistan, the sirens went off, and, like, shit was crazy, and, like, I was just like, what the fuck is happening? And, like, I looked over, and there were these warrant officers just standing there, like, not getting to cover. And I was like, aren't you guys gonna get to cover? And they were like, nah, like, if it hits me, it hits me. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's like you left that up to chance, to fate, right? Like, they're screw it, and, like, when you get back after that, like, after all these days, months of that happening every single day, sirens going off, and you going, this could be the day that I walk to the showers and that rocket just happens to hit the showers and I'm done, right? That's it. Game over, man. Right. And then you get back after all those months, twice, right? After 2 deployments, and you're going, how the hell did I survive that? or even little things that happen to us, situations that we got into, hijinks, if you will, that we're like, how did we make it out of that alive? Like that's the kind of stuff that makes you go, is it because I'm lucky, or is it because I'm like sly, or I'm good at like life or something? Like, does that make you better at life than somebody else? Who knows? And so I have to question a greater power always, because I want to know what it is specifically. Like, I know there's something out there. There has to be. Like, it's crazy to me that we exist just in general, and so I have to ask those questions, and when all these religions, like, it's not just you, or Christianity, or all these other religions. There are other religions that will tell you, like, no, no, it's our God that whatever, or whoever, or whatever, right? And so you have to go, well, what makes you so sure, right, that it is your God? And I can't, and every argument that's ever been brought to my table about that, it's either, well, they don't answer the question, or they just say, well, it's faith, right? And to me, like, and no offense, please don't take offense to this, but to me, faith is a cop out in that sense, because
I agree.
you're
I
not.
told you that a minute ago. I said I don't like when
Yeah,
people do that.
I know, but I'm saying, like, I'm not trying. I'm saying that I don't want you to feel like that, like I'm attacking you for that.
Oh, I
I
certainly
guess,
feel attacked.
like I like I respect the like people that have faith, because I just can't. And I told this to my dad recently too. I was like, I can't just have faith in something. Like, and it's not even that I need to see it. I want to experience it. You know what I mean? And I haven't. And like, if there's like a God or something, and I've told this too to so many people, is that if God exists, then for me to acknowledge that he exists, he needs to come down and talk to me, like in person, like visit me, for God's sake. I think I'm owed that. I think I'm owed that for existing in this world that he created and gave me like life to like have to go through the rat race, like the shit. Like, if God was the one that created me, right? Like, that's what we're going to say. God was the one that created me. Then he gave me not, he kind of gave me a bum deal. He botched it. I don't have good genetics. I didn't come from a rich upbringing. I live in California, like all these things are not things that I chose, well, when I was born, obviously. But I'm saying, like, these are things that I have to go, well, why did you do that to me? And then the answer is, well, because your father's fathers, all these dudes way back did a dick move, and now you've got to suffer for me. And that kind of, to me, seems like bullshit. Like, I don't like that. That to me just seems unfair. It seems so unfair that, like, you have to like give all this stuff and worship this dude and all these things because you want to go to heaven. Like, I don't understand the end game for it. Like what is so great about heaven? Like, there's this idea of heaven, and like, why is it that God is like the only way to that? And like, or else you are damned, right? Like, that's it. Like, you're just damned. And like, that's my big question, is like, like, at what point do I know that I'm damned? Like, I can say my prayers, and I can ask for forgiveness, and I can do whatever, and like you said, have faith, and all those things, but that doesn't ensure it. That doesn't let me know for sure. All my life I could go having this feeling, and just boom, like one day I say God damn it, and then boom, that's it. Like, done, like I'm
Well,
damned
that's
for
not how
all
it works.
eternity. Well, I know that's not how it works, but my point is that it seems a little unfair that saying the dude's name a little shitty is reason enough to be damned. Like, to me, that's a little unfair. Like, I let people talk shit about me all the time. It doesn't bother me. I'm not at all Christ-like or like God. It doesn't bother me. Why should it bother God so much? You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But that's just me, and I'm not trying to attack Christianity specifically. I'm just saying, my point is that in
How
spite
dare
of all
you?
in spite of all the rules and regulations of religion, to me, I can't get behind all of these values from various, communities and groups or whatever, because I can't get behind something that I don't fully believe in. Like, I can't go, well, yeah, I believe that's okay, and I believe that's okay. To me, it seems like religion was just a bum deal. Like, the whole lead up to it and then to heaven. Like, I can't possibly imagine heaven being great. Like, without emotion, or without crying, or without whatever, like all the things that, like, that. In fact, let's talk about that, if you don't mind. Let's talk about what heaven is described as in the Bible, so that I can get the picture of whether it would be ideal for me.
Sure.
Like, okay, you're a car salesman, sell me on heaven as if you were saying this is what heaven's going to be like. And you know
So here's what I'll say. I don't know, because I think we mentioned it last week. What we know about Christianity a lot of times is not derived from Scripture. It is brought about by what scholars have said since Scripture, and that has become canon. All right, or it's become doctrine, and it's become the belief of particular denominations. From one denomination to another, even within the Protestant faith and closely related ones, you'll find that there are such great differences between, I don't know, for instance, Methodism versus Reformed Episcopal versus Baptist, what heaven is going to be like. Now, my opinion, as an eschatologist, right? I'll say this first and foremost. Ask me when's the last time I thought about what was going to happen after I died. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You cut out for some
Oh,
reason.
okay. Ask
You're like
me
skipping.
ask me when's the last time I thought about what was going to happen after I died.
Okay, I'm asking you. I'm asking you. What was the yeah.
It's been a long time. I haven't even that's not even been something that I've considered. It's to the point where I don't even think about that. Like a lot of people will chastise Christians, right? For, oh, you're only doing these things because you care about what happens when you die. And you want to get this reward of heaven, right? Or you don't want to be damned, right? That's a lot of people's arguments, and that's fine. That's a pretty valid argument in most cases. But for me, I don't remember the last time I sat down and really worried about, oh, where are you going to spend eternity, Tom? You know, like, are you going to be damned? Are you going to heaven? Are you going to this, that, and the other? I don't think about that. It's just not something that registers in my mind. And it's not, again, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything by focusing on this career potentially in the ministry, or what I do in the ministry. I don't think about what comes later. Like, I don't think about the reward, right? Or I don't think about the punishment either. These are things that come up when somebody's like, oh, like, for now, when you brought it up, now I'm thinking about it, because I'm like, okay, let's talk about heaven and hell. I think that heaven, as outlined in Revelation, they paint a very clear picture of it in Revelation as a city that is placed on earth called New Jerusalem. And I have a feeling it will probably be, and I jokingly call it Heaven Headquarters, Heaven HQ, where it lands in Israel. And that's where because it's a walled off area, and there's a finite amount of space as described in Revelation. But it also says that, there's a river that runs through it, where the manna comes from, where the food and the light shines from God there in heaven, outwards. And I think that's why the universe is so big, right? Because I think after all is said and done, and after all the events of welcome Critter Me Timbers, welcome. She says hello to all you stunning people, so thank you for that. My ego needed that boost today. But I think that's why the universe is so big and we're unable to explore it. Like, what's the point of a universe so massive that we can't explore it in any lifetime, in any amount of time? Even if we would have had a spaceship from the dawn of man, we still wouldn't have explored the entire universe, right? So I think that's what's going to happen, is this New Jerusalem is going to be placed in wherever it is on Earth. Earth is going to be is transformed into this new location, and this is after the whole tribulation and after the millennium and after all that stuff that's said to happen in Revelation.
Armageddon. After
Yeah,
Armageddon.
after all that stuff happens, all those who are faithful in Christ, well, everybody, will rise from the dead and be judged. And if you are judged favorably, you will enter into the gates of heaven. If judged not so favorably, you will be cast into eternal hellfire in hell. But I don't think you are going to be limited to this New Jerusalem city, because again, even if only like the saints, the people we've even if the people who are spoken of in the Bible favorably are allowed into heaven, there's not enough room for everybody to comfortably live. And especially with mansions, right? He talks about everyone will have a mansion in heaven, and streets lined with gold in this.
I don't
I,
want I don't want a mansion or streets. That
right, right,
sounds
right, right.
boring.
Hold on. But I think that's just headquarters. Like that's just where God is going to reside. Kind of like the Ark of the Covenant. Like not everybody is going to surround the Ark of the Covenant, and certainly that wasn't even the temple where God resided. In the temple, in the holiest of holies, people didn't just congregate there, and that's not where everyone had to be. Everybody lived lives outside of that, and I think an eternity in heaven is going to be a retransformed earth with a heaven headquarters, heaven HQ, and we'll be able to explore the cosmos, all these different all these locations that we're unable to visit because we were bound by technology of the time. We're going to have an eternity to deal with that, so we'll be able to spend that eternity
But
exploring the
how?
cosmos.
Like how? Like that's my question is how?
Sure, sure.
Like are we going to gain some like so this is how I perceive it, right? Like I watch a ton of fantasy movies and whatever. And so this is how I perceive your explanation. We're going to rise from the dead as like zombies
No,
or I don't even know, like zombies or maybe our
no,
spirits come out of our body
no,
or
no, no, no,
something
no,
like
no. Let me answer these questions one at a time. Otherwise, I'll get lost.
okay.
Uh,
All right.
so this is one of the how it's described, right? Because our sin, well, the fall of man, right, came from Adam, our
Yeah, fuck that
fathers.
guy. Fuck
Uh,
Adam. Fuck Adam and fuck Eve, dude.
the
In their
fall of
stupid asses.
man, they sinned, right? And that has created this life of ours that experiences pain, struggle, torment, all this sort of stuff. We deal with all this stuff because of the sins of our father and the fall of man. When we rise, we are, there's a word for it, transfigured, I believe, where we come about as if sin had not impacted us. So we will come back in a form as if sin had not ever affected us in any way. That will be our transfigured bodies when we come back from the dead. So your spirit, right? Yeah. So your spirit will rise again because your body will be useless at that point. Skeletons, maggots, dirt. You'll have decomposed based off of how it happens, right? But when we are risen from the dead, we will be just like Christ was. When he rose from the dead, he was 3 days dead. He didn't come back stinking. He didn't come back all rigor mortis or whatever. He came back, he was a normal dude.
Rigor
right?
Morris.
Yeah, he wasn't just like walking around all clenched up like, some kind of weirdo. He was just a normal guy, back to normal. And I think and even they talk about that at the time. I forget which synoptic gospel talks about it specifically, but people rose from the dead. The saints rose from the dead
So
at
how
that
does that
time.
work? How does that work with people that have been dead for like decades that are just like dust in their coffins?
So you're
Will they like
asking me.
reconstitute into human beings?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's how it'll play out. Because you got to understand, you're asking me a question about like just basic physical mechanics or whatever.
That's how I have to.
Right. But you're also acknowledging the possibility of, and not necessarily agreeing with the possibility, but at least acknowledging that people are rising from the dead, and your hang up is whether or not their bodies will just form back into a human
exactly.
shape.
Like this is where I have to get.
Okay.
This is how I have to like break it down. Is I have to look at it at like from a film perspective. Like I'm viewing this from a filmmaker's point of view, where I go, okay, here's how I would write the movie, right?
Right.
If there's people coming back from the dead, reconstituting, and the dust is becoming like that begs the question of like, okay, how do we get there? Do we just like all of a sudden get this power where we can transfer to dimension or like how is that possible? Like, does he just go, boom, you're all in heaven? Like there's a dimension, or like there was that old movie Left Behind where when the rapture happens, people just disappear and their clothes are left there, right? Or there's even a theory that like you just float up into the sky with your clothes like left behind, right? Like I think it's interesting to think all that stuff Again, I agree with you. Like that's how I have to logic it as like, well, I have to at least give you a little bit instead of just being no, no, no. I have to go, well, okay, assuming that that is true. Let's assume that all of that is true. Then here's how I would logically put it together in that situation, right? And what your description of heaven is like heaven HQ, and then we can travel the cosmos. It seems to me that like that wouldn't be a place, right? Like that wouldn't be actually a place. Like heaven is all around us, right? It's just anywhere you want to go, which to me still doesn't seem very appealing. And like for me, that's got to be what it is that draws me to religion is what's so appealing about the spirituality or even heaven or hell. Like the worst part about religion to me, specifically Christianity, is that there is damnation. Like it
Yeah,
seems to me that that's just
scary.
unfair. Like it's so unfair. Like and the rules are so like flim flam, like you can't covet your neighbor's cow and you can't tell a lie and all these things that people do as humans like we always sin, right? That's the thing with the Bible, we all
Yeah.
sin, right, constantly. But it seems to me that if he had been more specific, like look, you rape a child, you're not getting into heaven. You rape a person, you murder a person, you're not getting into heaven, and that's it. Like it doesn't make sense to me that like he's going to say, okay, but if you ask for forgiveness, you're cool, you can still, that, to me that doesn't seem fair. Like we had this conversation, like the child rapist, right? The guy that rapes your child and he asks for forgiveness and then boom, he's in heaven there with you. Like, and it's funny to think like, well, you wouldn't feel anything towards the guy because you're in heaven with him. But really, doesn't that seem unfair? Like, I don't like that. I feel like people, and it's funny because I'm never the black or white guy. Like, there's got to be a gray area. But in this instance, I'm like, it's unfair that there is that gray area, that there's that point where you go, well, yeah, I mean, if the guy asks for forgiveness, then he gets to go to heaven. He gets this eternal reward or whatever and doesn't get damned. And it's like a loophole, where it's like, yeah, I'll just be sure to do that, and like, I don't know, it seems, and I know what you're going to say. You're going to go, well, you have to truly repent and truly feel that way and stuff. And I mean, the
So,
only person that would know is God, right?
well, here's my argument to that. Because Christ was very specific, like, whoever harms a child, like, he was very much, I don't remember the exact passage, so I'm not going to misquote him, but he was very against anyone who harmed a child, specifically. And anyone who corrupted a child. He was very, very specific about that. That was a very specific instance in which Christ spoke out. Um, Now, I'll say this: my son, my sons are children of God. I am a child of God. In that way, we are all, we're on an equal plane. If somebody harms my child, I, as a human, as a father, would be furious. Like, I would want nothing but the worst things for that person because that's who I am as a person, right?
Let me ask you this then.
Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah.
that
Hold on,
brings up a
let me finish this real quick before, because I'll
okay.
forget. Um, if somebody harmed my child, I would be very upset about that. It would be very, very difficult for me to forgive that person, even if they were truly repentant, because if they raped my one of my sons, or if they killed one of my sons, it would hurt deeply. But that is me as a human, okay? And that is a human thought. But my children are also children of God, and if God is willing to forgive that person, so much so that he is willing to allow them into eternal paradise, who am I to not also forgive that person in that instance, when we are both standing before the maker and we are both standing before him for judgment? And if God says, I forgive you, to the guy who raped my or killed my son, I would have no choice, as a fellow child of God who just witnessed the Father, the ultimate person, or the ultimate being in charge of forgiveness, forgiving that person. I would have no choice but to realize I have to forgive this person. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. It's right there in the Lord's Prayer, as spoken by Christ. So, as somebody on this spiritual realm now that I'm no longer bound by my earthly emotion, right? I have to assume that at that point I would forgive him also. At a point, or like to that same degree, where I am willing to absolutely absolve him of those. And plus, at that point, who cares? I'm with my son again. And he has been, this horrible atrocity has been, you know, wiped away, and hopefully he doesn't remember it, or hopefully, you know, I don't know. This all becomes doctrine at that point, but I have to assume that a loving God who's willing to forgive this man of that particular sin would kind of make things right in that situation. And that's just the image I have of God from what I've read in Scripture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure, of course. But I guess what I wanted to ask you was, would you be willing to take damnation for the sake of your own children?
Absolutely. And I've thought of this is one thing that I have thought about. If we were all standing before God, I've already in my mind acknowledged that I would, assuming one of my children uh, was to be, I don't know, if the rapture happened today, right? Or if we were all called and we were all Judgment Day today, and
Well,
my
not
children, say again.
I said, well, not all of us.
Well, so assuming this happened today and one of my children did not meet the requirement, and this is again assuming that the age of responsibility and all that sort of stuff doesn't come into play and none of that is real. Assuming children are subjected to the possibility of eternal damnation, I would with it wouldn't even, my heart wouldn't even skip a beat. I would say, please, just take me instead. Let him go. And I think as time goes on, your children, this is something that I've already thought about and I've already prepared myself mentally for. Um, I'm preparing myself mentally for Judgment Day in case I raise my children wrong, right? Because it is my responsibility to raise them right. And if I failed them, it should not fall on their shoulders, my shortcomings. And if one of them is condemned to damnation, I would gladly take their place without even thinking about it for all eternity. Absolute misery and torment and torture. I would, without even flinching, give my eternity up for one of my children. I've already considered that possibility, and I've already accepted it as something that I was willing to do. So, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's interesting. To me, like, it's interesting that you take that stance and that you would do that, because that's like that's not what would happen though. That's not what would happen, right? Like, assuming that like this is how it works, right? God would be like, "Sorry, dude, your
Yeah, I
son
mean,
goes
I
to
don't know.
hell."
It would be a tough pill to swallow. And I've thought about that. I've thought about all aspects of it. Like, because I don't get to choose, right? I don't get to choose how judgment works, right? I would just hope that you talk about how you want to speak to the manager when you get to heaven,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It would be the same way with me. Like, that's the
yeah,
kind of attitude I have for my children. If
yeah.
Now, would I say the same about anybody? I don't know that I would. Like, I don't know that if God said, "Hey, look, here's this guy. You don't know him, but he is condemned to damnation. Would you take his place?" I know that I wouldn't be as quick to do it
It's so
as I
funny to
would
me
my
that this is
children,
your argument. It's
right?
so funny to me that this is your argument, because that isn't that how you should be for
It's how it
everybody.
should be. Yeah. But
That's how you should be.
I am bound by my earthly. I'm just being honest with you. I'll be nothing less
No,
than
I
honest
love
with
that. I
anybody on
appreciate
this
the
show.
candor.
And
No, I
certainly
appreciate the candor so much.
so I that's how it should be. I should be willing. Now, earthly, right? I've come to this I've had this argument with somebody in the past when people talk about abortion. Would you willingly give your life in place of a potentially aborted baby? And I would. I have thought about that long and hard, and I have come to the realization that if somebody said, "We'll take your life in place of this baby, this fetus, right, or this embryo, right, whatever they want to call it," because your opinion of abortion is so strong, or against abortion is so strong, "We'll take your life and let this baby live. Will you take that?" And I would. I would give my life for a baby that I don't know, but I would not give my eternity uh, just instantly for somebody that I don't know, right? Like somebody who had a shot. I would not give that up. Somebody who I loved, and somebody who, for you, V, I would too. And I say that in all sincerity. If somebody I knew had come to Judgment Day and God said, "Hey, look, he's looking at potentially eternal damnation. Will you take his place so that he can enter the kingdom of heaven?" I would. Anybody that
I would
I
never let you
know,
do that. if we
And
were up there together like in that situation, I would never let you do that for me. I'd be
I
like,
know,
no,
I know,
no,
I know,
no,
I know.
no. He did a way better job. I deserve this. But then I would argue, at least in my defense, that's what I go back to is like, like all these things that we got to do and rules we got to follow and all this stuff so that we can get to that, right? Which again, like I agree with you, like that shouldn't be the reason why you're doing it is for the reward, right? That's not, and I think that's admirable that you think that way because that is what I see. Like it's so funny to me, people come at me with religion. A lot of people, and I'm not you, but like there are other people in my life that tend to do the what I call Bible bashing, where they're like, God this and God that, like this I love God character just like shoves it down your throat, right? Like to me, it's like fine, like whatever you believe. But at the same time, like there are all these values that you're supposed to emulate, right? But nobody really
Yeah.
does. Like this, like, and I love that I'm able to come back to this I love God guy because he's so obsessed with this religion and so obsessed with Christianity, but he portrays none of it. His name should be I love God, but not the Jews or not everybody else, or I don't love anybody but God. Because that's not what God preaches or Jesus preached, is you should love everybody, regardless, right? You should just love everybody. And you should be able to stand in the way of a bullet for them because that's what your love should be towards other people. And yet all these people like, and that's where I get sickened by Christianity, is because nobody really does portray that. They
Oh,
all pretend to be this religious whatever, and I'm so holier than thou, or I have this like, I like an Aquatine when he goes, you know why I go to church? He goes, so you can feel better than me.
yeah.
And he's like, yeah, because of that, but also because God is real, right? Well, to me, it's like if that were true, and if religion is like that, then why aren't there so many people out there that are like that are willing to do that? There's a very finite amount of people that have that amount of love for other people that would still defend the rapist or the child abuser and go, no, his life is still worth saving. I'm certainly not that good. I'm not that good. But then you have people out there that are out there going, oh, I love God, but fuck the Jews and fuck the blacks and fuck all these other people. They don't belong, whatever. To me, that's not Christianity. That's not love. That's not what God preaches. And trust me, I grew up Christian, man. I was raised a pastor's kid. So I know the Bible. I've read the Bible a few times. And I know that God doesn't preach hate to other groups at all. That's not in the Bible. And it's funny to me that people like that's where I always get disgusted is because people translate it however they want. And it just goes to this like, well, I can interpret it however I want to suit my needs. And like, there's all these gray areas that you go, well, God said this, and this is how I interpret it. And like, I don't like that. And that's why, like, when I go with religion, I'm going to need to see God come down and tell me, here's what I want, dude. And then I'll start listening to you. But having all these other people and books and things telling me, like that I can't get behind. That's not enough evidence for me to go, hey, there's a God out there and I'm going to do what he says.
Hey, you know what's funny is he did come down and say that, and it's the Bible, right? The problem is the canonization of it, right? And how some councils were able to determine what went into the Bible and what did not. And that's why I read a lot of the lost scriptures. But then you end up with this problem of what of the lost scriptures is actually God breathed, and what of our current Bible that we have now is God breathed, right? Because that's the whole idea of the Bible, is that it's God breathed, like God made it into what it is. But it was fucked with by man in these councils of Catholic leaders and former the church fathers and those people, and they decided what stayed and what went. So I've actually been struggling lately. I know I talked about this last week. Is I'm in the middle of a Pauline epistles class and doing exegesis on Paul's letters, and Paulie, as if like he and I are buds, Paul's letters. And I started to wonder. I'm like, what if? Because Paul was a Jew, he was a Pharisee, right? He hated Christians. He was a Christian terrorist. Like he killed Christians, and that was his thing. And then all of a sudden, one day, he was visited by Christ, and Christ said, "Hey, I need you to go out and fix the churches." And then what he taught, ended up being the Christian rule book, essentially. And so it made me wonder whether or not Paul, like, what if Paul was a bad guy? Like, what if Paul tricked us? Like, what if Paul was the Pharisee who meant to end Christianity. He meant to continue his mission to kill Christians, to end Christianity, and what he taught is not scriptural. So I started to struggle with that a lot, and that's something that I've been working through lately. But I also start to want, like, my big argument is I don't think God would have allowed the Bible to become what it is today without, like, I don't think he would have allowed it to happen. So that's my argument in that case. But I think that's about as close to God coming down and visiting you, because God doesn't. I don't think God speaks to people in the way that you want him to, in the way that it would be convenient for all of us, right? Where he came down and spoke to us directly. I don't think that's how it works. I think God speaks through people in your life, right? And so that's the hard part. That's what I've been struggling with UV for these years, all these years that I've been trying to convert you. I'm trying to be that guy who God is speaking through to get you to convert V. As somebody said in the chat earlier, this quickly became, you had me at let's convert V. That's kind of what I've been trying to do, and a lot of times what we try to do. But you make a lot of valid points with your conversation about people don't act as Christians are supposed to, and there's no denying that. I fall short of the glory of God every single day. Admittedly, I'll be the first to admit that I fall short of the glory of God every day, and I try not to fall short of the glory of God, but that's just how it goes. And as hard as I try, I'll just never be able to fall within the grace of God on any given day, just because I'm human, right? And it's not for lack of trying. It's just we suck as human beings. We suck, and
I feel like I'm a pretty good human being.
Well,
let me go ahead and say I'm a good human being.
You are a good human being, V, and I will give you that.
I'm good at it.
I'll give you that. But as a human being, I suck at being I suck at falling within the grace of God. I fall short. I suck as a human being trying to fit into God's narrow plan for human beings, right? So God's definition of what we're supposed to do as human beings, we suck at it. All right? As human beings, we're fine. We're doing great as human beings from a human being standpoint. But from a divine standpoint and a divine intention of what human beings are supposed to do, we suck. Is that a better interpretation, V? Can I use that? And you would agree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I appreciate you always giving me the like, I'll never not be receptive to your arguments about Christianity, and like I appreciate it. Like I do. I always tell my dad, I go, I keep Tom around with his fanatical stuff because I enjoy it. I enjoy listening to his opinions. In fact, you're my go-to over my dad for religious stuff. My dad, he gets frustrated because he's been through it long enough. In fact, he always tells me to tell you not to go down the preacher road. He always says, just tell him don't become a preacher. That's what he says. He always says that. In fact, he's actually said he wants to have some words with you before about it too. So I told him, I was like, maybe one day we'll get you on the show or something. But no, I appreciate it, and I think it's interesting. You know, a lot of the comments in the chat and stuff, people bringing up different topics. I love God, man. He just like floods our chat, you know, because this is his topic, right? But I think it's interesting that he says you can love someone and tell them not to function in society, and then he goes on to further his argument by making racist comments, which is hilarious to me because it's such a contradiction to those values. Like it's like a child's contradiction. Like they can't fathom these own simple logics. Like if all sin is the same in God's eyes and all of us are sinners, then I hate to break it to you, but we're all equal in God's eyes, even black people and Jews. Like that's what you're gonna like this I love God guy is gonna get to heaven and be like, oh, there's black people here? Are you kidding me? Like he's gonna be so pissed. He's gonna be so pissed when he gets to heaven and sees black people in his neighborhood. Like that's so funny to me. Like my dad's biggest joke is that you're gonna get to heaven and it's not gonna be you going, oh, you're here. It's gonna be people looking at you going, you're here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's so funny to me because that's how people see it, is like, especially people like I Love God who want to damn people on their own, like go, oh, these blacks or these Jews, they can't function in society. And it's like, Well, that's a blanket statement. Like you're blaming everybody in that group for one thing that offended you or bothered you. Like to me, it's like it's something that's personal with this guy. Like I imagine maybe a black person or a Jew wronged him in his life, and now it's like, oh, he's just out for them personally, you know. But he's gonna be sad if there is a heaven and he gets up there and there's black people in his neighborhood, because that's the fact of the matter with religion and Christianity is that's all equal, all sin are equal, and so it doesn't matter what color you are, you're going to end up in heaven or hell, right? That's how it goes. Is that true, or is there a God that I don't know about
No,
that
yeah.
only lets white
Our
people
God
into heaven?
is our God, the God of Abraham and
Is there
Isaac and
white heaven
Jacob.
and black heaven or
No,
something I don't know?
the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has a swastika tattoo on his chest, like on American History X.
Yeah.
No, so here's the thing: I was baptized in a predominantly black church. I was one of two white couples in the church. The rest were all black. I have no. I've made this very clear. I feel like I've made this very clear. I am not racist in the way that all black people are niggers, right? And I can say that because because this is the context I'm using. Granted, we
Mm-hmm.
may be shut down here in a moment. I don't see
Yeah,
people.
that was all we needed. Now I love God's
Right,
gonna go tell his lefty pals.
right,
He's
right,
gonna
right,
go.
right.
He's gonna go
There it
tell the
is.
lefty
Report it.
common V.
I
Yeah,
don't
Tim.
see black people that way. I see black people as people who there is a higher disproportionate number of people who act a certain way, right? But that's not to say that there aren't white people who act exactly the same way, right? Who
Yeah,
cannot function in society. That's not to say
yeah,
that there are, and we speak highly of Asians because Asians are very intelligent people genetically. Genetically, they're gifted for the most part. You see that, and that's why they have to be stifled in academia, right? Um, they're gifted academically, but that doesn't mean that there aren't Asian people who act the same way as these white people or black people who cannot function in society. That's not to say that that's not a trait that exists throughout all of humanity. There are some black people. I would argue to say there's like this huge amount of black people who are more talented, more intelligent, more gifted than I am. There are more Hispanic people who outdo me in every aspect of life. There are white people, like the same applies to them. That's not to say that there aren't people in every single group. The same way that we demonize, or I'm sorry, that we celebrated soldiers, right? We talk about how, oh, back in the beginning of the Iraq war, everyone was just like, oh, I love these soldiers. These soldiers, they're doing all this great stuff because they learned from the experience in the past in Vietnam when they came back and they were like, oh, we treated those Vietnam soldiers like shit. We need to celebrate these soldiers when they come home. So they loved soldiers, and also no soldier could do wrong, and we were kind of like put on this pedestal. But there were real pieces of shit in the army. Like we were some of them
yeah,
for a long time.
yeah.
Like we were
That,
really, like I would not put who we were in the army on a pedestal under no circumstances
yeah,
because
no,
we were total pieces of shit for a while.
yeah,
Um, and
totally.
but people would still see us. They'd see the uniform and they'd say, "Those guys are heroes. God bless them." You know, let's give them a hug. You know, welcome
Yeah,
home,
yeah.
soldier.
Dude, when I came back from Afghanistan, I went through Dallas, Fort Worth, and there was just it blew me away because I got off the plane and there was just this gigantic group of people cheering for me when I was coming back from leave. I was like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't know these people, but they were like, yeah, like soldiers. And I was like, okay, I didn't do anything special, but yeah, cool. You know, we did get derailed again
Right? Yeah, I
today.
see that
We
now.
got so derailed, dude.
The
We
but
didn't
no,
even get.
let's keep addressing this. But there were pieces of shit as soldiers, but we elevated to this high level. Same thing that we're doing with nurses, right, and medical people right now with this whole COVID hoax, right? We created this. Oh, the nurses and the doctors and the medical personnel. Now,
Yeah,
granted, they do a lot of really great things, and God bless our healthcare workers because they do a job that frankly sucks, right? Like they have to deal I had to I worked with them. I didn't work in that area. Like, I was not a medical personnel. I would not consider myself to be someone in the medical field when I was doing chaplaincy, but I was in the emergency room and I was in the intensive care unit. Like, those are two areas that just suck. Like, the people are very sick, they're hurting, they're having the worst day of their lives many times. And these medical personnel have to deal with them. That's not to say that there aren't nurses and doctors who are total pieces of shit, who go home and beat their wives, or go home and abuse
Right.
prescription medication, or drink alcohol to excess, or go home and beat their kids. Like, that's not to say that that doesn't exist, or lead like dark lives of. As a matter of fact, I saw something just recently about. Oh, who was it? It was somebody, like a very high profile person, who in a position of trust, who was actually a child molester. And like, you don't know this about these people until it comes out, and you're like, oh wow, even doctors can be child molesters. Oh wow, even pastors can be child molesters. Oh wow, this person can be a wife beater. It transcends all races. Is there a higher disproportionate amount in certain races than others? Yeah. I mean, there's no denying that based on the data. But does that mean that every black person is going to be a fentanyl abusing pregnant woman, holding a gun to a pregnant woman's belly? No, that does not mean that, because we have people like Dr. Ben Carson, very accomplished neurosurgeon. We have people like Denzel Washington, very outspoken, charitable, talented actor. We have all these instances in which people defy this stereotype, and you can't think in this black and white, not like, no pun intended, but you can't think in this like, all of this person is bad. Are all Jewish people bad? No. Is there a higher, like a disproportionate amount of Jewish influence in Hollywood and the political system in the United States, to a point where it's an issue that should be addressed? Yes. Is there a disproportionate amount of crime amongst black people or black populations in the poorer communities in the inner city? Yes, there absolutely is. Certainly more so than there would be in white suburbia. Is there, a higher number of human trafficking people, or human traffickers from Saudi Arabia, or around the border with coyotes, right? And those types of people? Sure, yeah, but that's like kind of like a societal issue more so than it is a race issue. So you need to kind of broaden your understanding of, if you want to be racist, that's fine. I can't tell you not to be racist, and I can't tell you that some of the things that you're saying aren't true based on the data. But what I will say is, if you need to look at it, be more so understanding of the societal issues that surround these things, and so that you can, rather than being a racist, you can be a data scientist or a data analyst. Like, you can be a data analyst and present information that people would argue is racist, but you can just say, hey, this is just the data. I'm not saying these things, which is kind of what we do here on the show. We make a lot of stereotypical racist jokes, but when we say things that could easily be construed as racist, we back them up with the data. So it's not necessarily racism as much as it is just pointing out the fact that, hey, the data led us here, and there's no denying this data. There's a difference between presenting data and being a bigot, if that makes sense, and I hope it does.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
to get where I was going with all that, V, when you talk about, and I'm going to stand with you on this one, of course, I'm going to stand with you on any issue that you present, but when you talk about this issue of, you can't be a racist, like a hateful racist bigot, and be a Christian at the same time. Because Christ didn't say, hey, love the Gentiles, or hey, let's love the people from this particular portion of the Mediterranean, or hey, let's love just the people who only have heterosexual sex. He didn't say that. He said you love everybody. You can hate the sin. You can argue that the sin, you can tell them that my dad is one of the most, I would argue that he is the most faithful Christian I've ever met. And I may be a little bit biased, but he exhibited, my dad never told me he loved me until his, that I can remember, even as a child, until his deathbed. And I just knew that he loved me because the way he acted, right? And I knew that he was a Christian in the way that he handled situations when my wife and I split up. When she came back 6 months later, I welcomed her back because I loved her, right? I love her to this day, 15 years later. But I loved her enough to say, I forgive you. You need to get the forgiveness. You need to have my family forgive you if you want to make this work. And she did. She came with me on leave. She came with us on leave, actually, because V came with me at that point. We
I
had
was
already
there.
agreed.
Yeah, I was
Um,
totally there.
when she came in the door, um, and we had told my folks, hey, we're about there, blah 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 blah. When we came through the door, my dad just walked right past me. He hadn't seen me in months or whatever. I don't know how long it had been since he had seen me, but he walked right past me, didn't even address me, and he welcomed my wife, and he hugged her and said, welcome home. And that was his, like, she didn't even ask for forgiveness. She didn't say, hey, this is, this was my reason for what had happened. He knew how much the split up had hurt me, but he didn't care about me. Like, he didn't at the time or whatever. He cared about her and welcoming her back to the family and forgiving her and letting her know that she was forgiven. The rest of my family, it was a little bit more difficult, but my dad, on the other hand, he didn't care. He didn't need her to ask for forgiveness. He didn't need to know that he didn't need any backstory or anything. He just welcomed her back and forgave her. And that was just how it was with my dad. And he exhibited that behavior in every aspect of his life. As I look back on my childhood and as I grew up, everything that I think about my dad, I'm like, okay, I get what he was doing there because it's right here in scripture. So that's kind of like when I judge people, and I shouldn't judge people. When I judge people as Christians, I think of them as, I would think, like, did my dad do this? Is this something that my dad would do? Does this person uphold the same values? Does he meet the same standards that my dad meets? And that's how I judge. I judge myself harshly because I'm the same way. Am I living a life that my dad would have lived? Am I meeting the same standards that he met? And I fall short of that standard often, all the time, because he was a good Christian. And I have confidence that of the people who are met on Judgment Day, I have a feeling that he will be one of the few that will be met with Christ saying, well done, my good and faithful servant. I think I will be met with, well, that was a good try. You, like, you tried, and I appreciate that. But I think that's what a lot of us will be met with something short of what my dad will be met with, I think. Well done, my good and faithful servant. And I think that's the most honorable thing you can be met with on that day of judgment. And I don't think many people I don't think hardly anybody meets that standard of, do I uphold the standards of Christianity, the bare minimum standards even. And one of my classes, I had to read a book recently where it was about cultures that have never had Christian ministry or missionaries, and they're living better Christian lives than we are in a society that has like this heavy Christian influence, right? They're more charitable, they're more loving, they're more giving, they're more accepting, they're more just like all the things that we're supposed to be as Christians. They do a better job of it than we do, and they have never had Christian influence. So you're not wrong, V, when you say that people suck as Christians. You're absolutely right. I suck as a Christian. I know everybody in the chat who thinks that they're a good Christian falls short. I know Mike, and Mike is one of like my go-to guys. He's way more Christian than I am. He does a better job of living these values than I do. I would say that even Mike falls short of this basic fundamental standard of what Christianity is. And I think a lot of our audience who kind of like is like us, maybe even further into this type of white supremacy, or perhaps even a bigotry. They fall into this bigotry, this idea of bigotry. I think that a lot of those people would do well to look back at the fundamentals of what Christ taught and focus more on that and less on what you know, the bigotry. Because I can sit here and I can talk shit about George Floyd all day long because he was a piece of shit. He was a garbage human being, and he was a worse human being than I am. And I feel like rightfully able to judge him as a human being. I don't know who he was as a Christian, but based on his actions, he exhibited zero Christian fundamental values, right? So I feel like I can cast judgment on him as a human, but maybe there's more to him than I understand, and that's God's business. That's Christ's business to judge him. If I end up one day standing beside George Floyd on Judgment Day and God says, I forgive you, welcome to my kingdom, to George Floyd, who am I to judge and say, well, but God, hold on. You know, that's not my place to judge that. I can judge him as a human because he was a shitty human being. But as I can't judge his heart, I can't judge his spirit. I don't know. So that's up to God and Christ to decide. Christ died for him. I didn't. That's not my place. So, anyways, if you're gonna be a white supremacist, like, I don't know how you can be a white supremacist and a good Christian at the same time. You can maybe be a Christian, but you're not gonna be a good one. That's my opinion on the matter. V, did you want to shill?
Yeah, we went way over, huh, today. Yeah, I guess we had a lot to talk about. I mean, it's funny we got derailed, but it was a good show this week. I always like it when we get to talk theology and actually like debate, you know. I think that is a lot of fun for us, and I know the people in the chat when they get to like join in too. As always, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, and I have my LinkedIn there too. If you guys are ever looking for like an art job, always looking for artists. Actually, Tom and I right now are working on our show. Hopefully, something can come of that. Tom's doing a little art. I actually got the privy of seeing a design that he did, and I really like it. So I'm looking forward to what we can come up with in the next couple of weeks here. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't, as the douchebags say, like and subscribe for videos. And we have a what is it, Etsy? No, not Etsy, Redbubble. We have a Redbubble, so go check out our merch. We've got some cool shirts. My favorite is the Jake Hoob shirt. So pick that one up if you're a fan. Pick up a shirt. I'm still doing the contest. We actually lost a subscriber, so we're not at 666 anymore. So we're not at 666 anymore, but we are getting close to that 700 mark. So don't forget, if you take a screenshot of that 700 mark and send it to me, I will send you a shower curtain, courtesy of you had me at Bigfoot and all that. Um, I guess that's it. That's all I got. Was there anything else I forgot? We love you guys. Even you, I love God. As much of a douchebag as I think you are, I still love you and hope that you end up in heaven where you want to be. Even if I don't get there, because I'm gonna get there. This is how I see it. Is I'm gonna get to heaven and God's gonna be like, his judgment will just be whether he liked you or not. And you'll get there and he'll be like, oh, Tom, you're such a cool guy. You did all those cool things. And then he's gonna see me and he's gonna go, I didn't really like you that much. You were kind of douchey. And I'll be like, come on, come on.
Come on, God, cut
Yeah,
me a
come on.
break. Cut me some slack, God.
Yeah.
And by the way, I want to say that I wasn't picking on Mike because I think that he's like, a disgusting heathen or anything. I'm picking on Mike because I love him and I see him as a Christian brother, and I feel like I'm allowed to pick on Mike for that reason, and hold him to a certain standard. He's like he's my unofficial accountability brother, where he has to, if he's not upholding the values of the fundamental values of the New Testament, I can pick on him about that. Yeah, other than that, I appreciate you guys sticking with us. I mean, you guys hung in there for 2.5 hours, and we're way over.
Right.
And appreciate you guys sticking around and hearing. This is the sort of theological debate that V and I have, just texting one another, like
Right.
on a somewhat regular basis. So I'm glad you guys got to sit in on it. I have no idea what we're gonna call this episode, but I'll figure something out.
Oh, I forgot to mention the Discord. Don't
Oh
forget
yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah. I'll do that real quick. If you haven't already, and you would like to join us in the Discord, we would love to have you. We have a lot of good chats there. There's still just only a few of us that are sitting there chatting and carrying on throughout the week, and you get a lot of like the insight on what's going on and what's coming in the coming week and that sort of stuff. You kind of get a behind the scenes look of Tom and V. If that's the sort of thing that you're into, you're more than welcome to join us there. And if you don't know, you can switch channels within the Discord server, and you can go from the grabassery, which is just the chat, and then you also have the haunted memes, which is where we post all the memes, just like funny shit that we find and we want to share. And then you have the Wendigo nudes, which is kind of where like Jurassic Weeb posts his tentacle porn and shit like that. So a lot of good times. We spend a lot of time throughout the week. Mike says, my wife just moved over, scared of the lightning strike. But yeah, if you'd like to join there, I'll make sure that's included in the description. And if you're on podcast, I have no idea how to get that information to you other than to just come on to @YouHadMePodcast on Twitter, which you can view just without a Twitter account, and you can actually find the Discord link there. If you would like to buy some shit from the store, we greatly appreciate it. Otherwise, yeah, like V said, I've had to shift my work into this project that we're working on, where I'm doing just kind of like the character design. So some of the designs for the show have gone to the back burner, but I will try my best not to forget about you guys. If you guys want to reach out to me, I know we do a lot of theological discussion on the show, but if you have questions and you don't necessarily want it to be brought up, because I know some people are very sheepish and shy about that sort of stuff, you can always reach out to me on the side. I'm happy to talk to you about theology and that sort of stuff one-on-one. If you want to talk, I'm more than happy to do that and talk more about my opinions. I'm not a church father. What did I tell you the other day? V and I were talking about the church fathers and how I don't believe necessarily in anything that the church fathers say. And when people say, well, but John Chrysostom said, and I say, nothing, you idiots, John Chrysostom's dead. He's locked in my basement. I don't necessarily ascribe to all that, so a lot of my stuff is all scriptural based, Church of Christ, Church of the New Testament type stuff, rooted wholly in New Testament scripture. I do read the church fathers, though, so I understand where some of their stuff is coming from. I'm happy to talk about all that regardless of denomination, and regardless of whether or not you are an atheist, agnostic, or a Christian, or a Catholic. Happy to talk to you about anything that you have to ask me. I'm willing to answer it, and I won't laugh at you, and I will treat you as an equal, a brother in Christ. So, all those things being said, we will see you all next week for pyramids, hopefully.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.